Well, good Saturday evening to everyone. How are you? It is good to see you, and it is good to be seen by you. Me, being the one happy to be doing the seeing and the being seen, and Bill Sylvie, aka the Dungeon Delver, coming to you from a heretofore undisclosed secret location somewhere in the swamps of sunny Central Florida. How are you on this Saturday evening? Crimson Jester, John Strain, Nordic Maelstrom, Michael Dale. Hello, hello. And of course, we've got some folks watching over on Twitter too. If you're watching us over on Twitter, X, then please give us a shout out, and I will see your comments pop up. So I want to take a minute to mention something that I'm not going to mention. I haven't really talked much in terms of wrap up about the hurricane we went through. Yeah, I sort of kind of did on Thursday. But the last things I'm going to say about it will probably be Monday evening, but we're going to talk about more pleasant things tonight. Braylor Skirata. Yes, we did survive. Kenneth, good to see you. Anyway, as part of the ongoing season of a witch, the Walpurgis, the Samhain, as it were, the spooky season, if you will, we have a very, very special guest tonight, and I have been nattering her for months now, but apparently she had some family obligation she had to take care of a few weeks ago, which I guess will insist she explain herself. North of the Rockies, I'm doing fine. Thank you for asking. But anyway, we'll bring her on here in just a second. She is an author. I have reviewed some of her work here before. We have right here on the bookshelf, hanging out with the other books. I have a couple of hers. Twitching Light, which is an anthology collection, and a full-length sci-fi novel, very good one there, called The Third Test. And fear not, more will be added to my collection as time goes on, I'm sure. Rabbit Wrangler, congratulations. Congratulations on the new employ. That is wonderful. Good to hear that news. But anyway, we have other fun stuff. So without further ado, please welcome author, poet, gamer, and general gadabout. Everybody put your hands together for the one and the only Miss Alyssa Hazel. How are you?
I am doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being had.
Thanks.
So first of all, I just want to say congratulations.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, I got married, so that's something new. It was really funny when you asked me to do it. I was like, well, I would soon, but the wedding's coming up, and I got a lot of things to do, and let me put you on my calendar, and finally we're here. So I'm just excited.
And given your oeuvre, I think the month and the timing is absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
So we're here to have some fun and talk about spooky writing things and fantastical writing things and everything Alyssa Hazel. So at any rate, now let me ask you this just right off the bat. Is Alyssa Hazel a pen name, or is that in fact you?
So technically it's now my maiden name.
Okay.
It is my actual legal name.
Okay.
I'm continuing to write under my maiden name, so Alyssa Hazel will be all on my books, but my legal name is changing, so if you're trying to look me up, you're not going to be able to find me too much longer. So yeah, my parents did a good job picking it out.
They did. It's a lovely name. So no doxing. No doxing her. I will find you, audience members, if you attempt that. But anyway, so Yeah, you have written that I have read. You have written a couple of excellent books, a full length, a compilation with some poetry that I need to take a knife and fork to and really get into. Shame on me for not doing the good poetry reading that I should. But um, I hate to do this to you. I this is like the what's your favorite color or hey baby what's your sign of interviews, but I'm gonna do it anyway because we got to get it out of the way. Alyssa, how did you get started writing?
Okay, so the funny thing is, actually today my mom handed me over a couple of composition books that so I really got started writing when I was very young.
Okay.
I wanted to write books. Whole life has kind of been like uh, the uh, the stuff that dreams are made of since I was a kid. And there have been a couple of things that I've wanted to do in the meantime, but writing was always my passion. I have, if you want to get technical about it, I started getting published in 2016, like 2016, 2017, somewhere in there.
Okay.
I got a couple pieces taken in by a couple magazines while I was in school, and through that experience, it kind of just made me decide I'd rather go self publishing. So my first book came out in 2019, and that's Twitching Light.
Okay.
And I've put out a book about one a year ever since. A couple of extra in the last couple of years, but right now I'm working on my, let's see, fifth book, no, sixth book,
Mhm.
um, with another one hopefully going to be on its way in 2025. So just been on the grind since 2018.
Wonderful. Well, I mean, you're just getting them out there. Um, Now, I am not asking you this because it just happens to be a cliche question, but I genuinely, and we can even talk about this at length after, how how do you find that motivation? How do you have that grind set? I mean, tell us a little bit about what puts the pedal on the gas for Alyssa before we dive into genre and so on.
Well, let me put it like this. This is what I want to do full time professionally. So for me, if I'm going to do that, I have to treat it like a job. I have to go in and say, okay, I'm going to put in this much time into it. I'm going to give myself deadlines. I'm going to give myself a budget. I'm going to give myself um, all of the guidelines that I would need to get what I need done. And looking at it from a sort of, I don't want to say financial side because that's very mercenary, but looking at it from a practical side, in order to get where I want to be, which is to be writing full time,
Mhm.
I know one gal who is an actual beast. Her name is Katie Cross. She releases a book a month and an audiobook, and she's just like she's a beast. Like she's my writer girl crush. So for me, looking at her, seeing that this is what she's doing it well. She's living her dream. I'm like, okay, if I want to make that goal, I need to be writing at least two solid books a year. So for me, looking at that way, it's if I want this dream to become a reality, I have to put the hard work in. I need to sit down. I need to grind it out. I need to put hours into it. It takes sacrifice. It takes time. Um, but if this is what I want to do, I have to do it. I have to sit down and make myself do it some days. I remember when I was writing the third test, actually and I was near the end of the first draft. And comparatively, um, it's the difference between um, writing a short story to me can take like a couple of days at most. Writing the third test, I was in month 9 of sitting with the same group of people trapped in this elevator, and I called my mom, and I said, "Mom, I hate this book so much. I'm stuck with these people. They're so dumb. I want to be done with this. And she's like, well, hold on, sleep on it and see how you feel. And then I sat down and I finished the first draft that night. Um, but it's really this case of taking, not letting the muse guide you. It's about sitting down and just getting the work done.
That's interesting. That's an interesting take. I think there's a lot of people, and look, I include myself in this sphere. I consider myself a pretty good writer of adventures for tabletop RPGs. I just don't do it nearly enough. And I think maybe a lot of folks, regardless of what field they're writing in, aside from stuff like I've written technical white papers, right?
Yeah.
But that's not anywhere near what we're talking about with you. But I think perhaps, and again, I include myself in that, a lot of folks tend to struggle with that whole muse versus grind set. And it seems to me like you've got the grind set. No, no question about it. But I do want to ask you, you kind of used some terminology,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to pin you down on this because I
All right.
want to know, when you talk, you said, I've been stuck in this elevator with these people. And I want to pull that back because I know you're a Tolkien fan, so hopefully
Okay.
you'll appreciate this. There was a line, and when I read this when I was a kid, because I thought, like, if you don't read the introduction and forward to a book, you're not reading the whole book. It's like you're starting, it's like cheating almost. So when I was reading Tolkien's introduction to the writing process of the Lord of the Rings, he said something that struck me so hard when I was young, and it resonates unto what you said, and that was Tolkien said, "When I stood next to Balin's tomb in Moria." He didn't say when I was writing this scene.
Yeah.
He talked about it from a standpoint of walking down into Moria and standing next to Balin's tomb and wondering how to proceed to tell that tale. And it's that echo comes back from what you're talking about. You are in the elevator with those four people. Is that your is that how you approach your mechanical approach? I'm fumbling for words here. Do you view it as a first person experience writing?
Well, it really has been dependent upon the project itself. I'll be completely honest. So, with these stories in Twitching Light, for example, um, this is the most pleasant way to say it. But it's accurate. I would describe those writing processes as like word vomit, because a lot of the stories in Twitching Light that I didn't write in college, because some of them were, a lot of them I sat down and wrote in one sitting. And the story just heaved out of me, laid on the paper, and I did like one more draft and they were done. Um, Twitching Light was basically a moment of, oh, I have all these stories that I've written for school and all this other stuff. If I write like 5 or 6 more stories, I have a book. And so it's kind of like a what's going to happen here. Um, for Pleasant Little Moments, it was completely different because now this is my second book. How do I follow it up? Do I want to continue some of the stories? Do I want to revisit characters? And then COVID happened, and I don't want to say it derailed me for a moment, but it was kind of like a, well, what do I do now? Because the convention where I was planning on premiering it, like, didn't happen. So, Pleasant Little Moments took about a year and a half. It took me a moment of like, I think where my grind set really comes in is from Pleasant Little Moments, because when you're quarantined in and you're in this fog of whatever, it's just like, okay, I gotta write this. So Pleasant Little Moments and Stress Fractures, I know people bring up like trauma kind of excessively when it comes to stuff, but pleasant little moments and stress fractures, a lot of stuff was going on in my personal life. So I took just what was going on and all that, and I just threw it into these stories. I took both like the worst possible parts of myself and examined them in there. I took like the fears that was going on. I took nightmares that I was having. I took all of it and just like threw it on the page and said that this okay, this is what's going on. This is how I'm feeling. Um, and it turned out pretty well. People have been enjoying it. So it not in sort of like a super artistic way, but this was just me trying to make sense of the world that I was coming into because um, I was barely in my 20s when COVID hit. So it really formed a lot of what well, a lot of my viewpoints and a lot of how I see the world is post that. That was Pleasant Little Moments and Stress Fractures. Third Test was a completely different ballgame. It was my first novel. It was my first um, attempt at writing something longer than like a couple of pages, 13 pages at most. And it was one of the most difficult things I've probably ever done in my life because I had to go from writing like sprinting to running a marathon. Um, and it was difficult. And I started with a couple different concepts and then I had to go back and rewrite it. But I think with the third test, and then particularly more with my newer book, Among the Juniper Trees, I took a lot more of like an intellectual approach to how it was going because you can't sustain a book on an emotion or a feeling for more than a couple of chapters. Um, so I had to sit down, I had to get technical, I had to go over little things. I actually had to write out a plan. Who knew you had to do that when writing a book?
Right.
Um, but the more often I get into novel writing, the more technical my work becomes,
Mhm.
and the more I actually have to write down where things go and keep track of things. So I guess to answer your question, each project that I've done has required a different mindset, a different viewpoint, and a different preparation. So
Right on. You know, that reminds me of a great story. Are you a fan of William Gibson's work?
uh, I will not pretend to be smart enough to know who he is. I'm so sorry.
Okay, cyberpunk author, but
Gotcha, gotcha.
he wrote a rather labyrinthian book. That was the second one in a trilogy called Count Zero, and he relates a story of having to when he was getting ready for the final draft, having to move his coffee table out of his living room and lay down note cards with all of the major plot points to follow the threads through the novel as he goes. Have you ever found yourself doing anything that extreme, like heavy note keeping? Like I've got to follow. Okay, this hooks into this, and I got to almost a wiring diagram for your works.
Not yet.
The emphasis on yet.
Yet. With Among the Juniper Trees, I have a Google Doc that I'll go back and edit. So I'll have like a bunch of breakdowns, and then I'll have okay, this is this group, and this is the named people, and these are distinctions, and these are like because in Among the Juniper Trees there are a couple of different houses and things like that. So I have to keep track of like color and of like and what are the why am I forgetting the words for it? Like the little insignia on the flags and like the symbology and all this other thing. So I have to keep track all of that. So I'll start with the page and then that page will grow into 2 pages. And then by the end of the first draft, it'll be 3 pages. And just keeping all these little notes together, like the color of a character's hair or eye color or things like that. Physical descriptions, things I want the character to accomplish by the end of the book, that sort of thing. Um, it's it. I think probably it might get to that. Yeah, coat of arms. Thank you, Elvin Maiden. I'm glad someone actually knows what words are in this chat. Um, the where was I? Words. Um, Probably for the third test sequel, which I'm hoping to work on next year. It's going to become. It's probably going to be my most intricate book. I haven't started writing it. I'm in the pre-planning stages right now. But it's going to. I'm drawing on inspiration from like the Berlin Stockade and the Berlin Wall.
Hmm.
So I'm going to be having to create like flesh out the government of the main planet Cassian, flesh out their intelligence agency, flesh out the Breckian current government loosely, um, what their intelligence agency would look like, uh, and a couple of other things. So I'm going to have to be basically forming a couple systems of government before I even get into the process of writing it. Um, just to have like a consistent, like, who is here and why is this person here and who would they send here, and it's just um because a lot of that will determine the characters that are in the book and how things proceed from there. So it's going to be an interesting time of it.
Oh, I can imagine. Now, I do want to talk about the different genres that you've worked in, prose and poetry, and the subjects of all of them. But I have been dying to ask you this question. I'm like, this is a banger, and I'm gonna
Okay.
save it for live streaming. So here you go. Um, would So far, would you consider the third test the most spiritual work that you've written?
um I guess it sort of depends. For context, I am a practicing Protestant Christian, so I write secular books, but
Mhm.
a lot of who I am, and part of that is my personal faith, comes into my books. There is a spiritual aspect to the third test. I um, In the book, I wanted to sort of look at faith, um, being stuck in a rut in your faith, and then sort of the aspect of religion versus heresy and sort of cultish activity involved in that, and sort of the misappropriation of faith and how it turns people. Um, so I would say it's probably my most overtly spiritual work. Um, I think in my short stories as well, I look at just sort of the attitude of the soul in some ways. For example, in my first book, Twitching Light, there is a story called Herxheimer's, which
Mhm.
I'll say is probably the darkest story I've ever written. There are stories that are gorier, I would say, but it's probably the darkest story I've ever written. And the premise is about mother, a single mother who suffers from chronic illness. And because of the illness, her son has missed a lot of schools. So the CPA, CPS, Child Protective Services, are threatening to take him away. So a lot of the aspects of the soul, what it means to be a mom, what it means to um, try to keep hold of your child, um, is sort of delved into and then kind of twisted in a way. So I think there is more religious aspects in the third test, but a lot of my work focuses in on who you are as a person and identity, and then just sort of like the spirit of a person, if that makes sense.
No, that does make sense, and that those are uh, those are definitely things that I think that the reader picks up on. I certainly did, and I had a lot of fun, a lot of goosebumps, excuse me, in your anthology work there, and a lot of stuff to enjoy. which brings us to your your. I expected you primarily when I picked up Twitching Light.
Mhm.
I thought, okay, all right, she's writing in the horror genre, the creepy stuff. I can get down with this. And then I read this banger of a science fiction novel, The Third Test, after that. Now, you know, great authors can work in just about any genre. I know people who have never read a single Berserker story by Fred Saberhagen and don't even know that he wrote, uh, this very hard military science fiction. I've never read the Book of Swords, and those people look at me like, you didn't know he wrote high fantasy? And I'm like, you didn't know he wrote military SF? So clearly keeping oneself pinned down in a single genre, even if it's what brings home the bacon, as it were,
Yeah.
is not something you want to do. But is there a particular genre that you prefer?
That's actually a really interesting question because a lot of what I'm doing right now between the third test and the fantasy book I'm writing, Among the Juniper Trees, I'm trying
Mhm.
to kind of determine what genre I want to focus in more on by playing around with stuff. Um, I really like writing like weird fiction. So as much as I've been tempted to write more like hard sci-fi stuff, particularly since I've like fallen into the BattleTech community, kind of
We'll
accidentally.
get there. We'll get there.
I don't expect any great opinions from me, but I've fallen in love kind of with the BattleTech kind of world as much as I have seen of it. Um, but I don't know if my writing style would suit hard sci-fi. I think if I want to hone in on a genre, I think the third test and like the world I'm creating and the genre I'm working with is sort of like a weird kind of semi-spiritual sci-fi with horror added in. I think may end up becoming the genre I lean more towards. But I'll be honest, I I I love horror. Like that's what I grew up on. I grew up on old creature features and monster movies, and um, I uh, I have signatures from like a Tom Savini poster signed in my
Nice.
my living room right now. Horror is my first love, and I think that in and of itself is going to be the core of whatever genre I am writing. Um, Even Among the Juniper Trees is a grim fairy tale mixed with like almost a historic fantasy kind of feeling. So I'm keeping in like the grim fairy tale aspect, even going into fantasy. Um, so I think horror is always going to be my root genre, but I think I'm going to be developing that in a number of different subgenre kind of ways.
Okay. All right. But again, you are preference aside, you're not letting yourself get pinned down, and
No,
I think that's a great thing. Um, and it's nice to surprise people, don't you think? Like, oh
yeah,
yes, you wrote you wrote this spooky horror novel. Yes, but I also wrote this space science fiction novel. So
yeah,
to bring a smile to people's faces. Um, so in promoting your work and getting out there and proselytizing the, the gospel according to Alyssa, how has reception been? I know what I like. I enjoyed the hell out of your book, but or books I've read so far.
Um, so in terms of, well, okay, let me put it like this. I think I probably do better than most people. And I'm not trying to brag. I just think I generally do better than most people when it comes to self-published stuff. I'm breaking even. I'm making money on my books, um, paying back my expenses. I cash flow everything, so I'm making back enough on my books to continue writing my books. It's not a money pit. I'm not bleeding money. So I think for the most part, I'm doing well. I would say that. Um, I am also not doing as well as I would want. And I think that's a balance that a lot of creatives have to go through, is especially if they want to do it full time, is treating it as almost like it's a small business.
Mhm.
So not like resting on sort of laurels, like, oh, I sold like 10 books this month. Well, I'm doing better than I was last year, and I'd like to do better next year if that makes sense. Like last year, I sold 40 books in total online, which a lot of people would be like, that's terrible, and some people would like, that's amazing. And as of now, I've tripled that in terms of how much I've sold online. Now, again, some people would be like, "That's terrible," and then some people would be like, "That's amazing." So, I think for the most part, I do better than a lot. I'm not where I would like to be, but that also fuels me to saying, okay, how can I write better? How can I market myself better? How can I pursue this passion better? And I think that's something that is going to be like the fire in my belly over the next couple decades. I don't want to entirely lose that, because I feel like when writers stop feeling hungry, their writing starts to suffer. um, I think there are a couple prominent cases right now, that
Mm.
is sometimes ends up being X's. I don't want to say punching bag, but it's kind of fun to make fun of him at some points. There are a couple of authors like that where when they stopped releasing books, they started just saying their opinions online, and that be their career. Um, so to I guess to answer your question, um, I'm new-ish at all this, and I
Mhm.
just want to continue to become better at it.
Well, I think you've, if I may,
Yeah, go ahead.
I think you've set a definite. I think you've definitely set the watermark for a measure of success. How's it doing for you financially? I once had a chance to talk to a fellow who ran a local comic shop, and I don't even remember what the subject we were talking about was, but I referred to his store. I said, "Well, I assume you do this because you love it." And he kind of gave me this look, and he said, "I do this because it makes money. I love comic books and I love games, but love will not keep the power running into this building.
Yeah,
Love will not keep my shelves stocked." Um, I feel like you have uh, again, not blowing sunshine here, but that seems like a pretty good metric
yeah.
by which you approach it. So we've had a few questions. Do you mind running through a
Yeah,
few questions
go,
real
let's
quick?
go.
Okay, so we've got some people who've been very patient. Rabbit Wrangler asks, "Are your books on Audible?"
That is a very good question and a frequently asked question. Up till now, I really haven't had the time to invest into making audiobooks. I For most of the time I've been writing, I've been working full time on top of that. But to answer your question, I have just finished recording my first audiobook. I haven't edited it yet. I want to add some like sound stuff to it to make it a nice little package. But I finished recording To Those Who Haunt You, which
Mhm.
is a micro anthology that I released late last year. It's very short. I like telling people it's less than a cup of coffee, but it gives people a sample. So if you are an audiobook reader, quote unquote, primarily, the book I'm hoping to be out by the end of the year. Depending on how well it does, um, I am hoping to continue to adapt my other books into audiobook format just so I can
Mhm.
get all of them available. It's been a request. That being said, it's something that at this point, like I mentioned, I cash flow everything. Um, there are a lot of people who would do my audiobook fairly inexpensively. Um, but on that same token, inexpensive still means that it could be anywhere from $500. It could be anywhere to like between 500 and 5,000. So right now, I can't really justify spending that much on getting all of them adapted at once. So it's going to be a slow process getting them adapted. But first audiobook should be out by the end of the year. Fingers crossed. If nothing explodes. And then the other ones will be following suit, hopefully over the next year or two.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Good question from your rabbit. Nordic Maelstrom asks, do you write using a computer, typewriter, or some other device, or handwriting?
Um, Primarily, I use computer. One because my handwriting is actually pretty terrible. I describe it like I belong in a schizophrenic ward. It's very very chicken scratch. If I wasn't a writer, I'd be a doctor. Um, bad joke. I'm sorry.
No, that's
Um,
okay. That's okay.
Um, I prefer using Google Drive actually because that allows me to be able to go from working on my laptop to working on my computer if I prefer. Um, so generally speaking, I bounce between those two. Sometimes if I have an idea and I don't have my phone with me, I'll write something down. But I like using the Notes app on my phone to write things down. For example, my husband and I, we honeymooned in the Shenandoah Valley, and there was the name of a flower there that I was like, this is like that. That's kind of metal. I think it was like the widow's weeping or something. And it's the type of orchid, and I'm like, what the heck? I don't know. I don't know why they named it this, but I'm writing this. I'm writing this down. So, um, so to answer your question, it's mostly computer. I my handwriting's not that good.
All righty. Let's see. I think I know the answer to this one because we just discussed it, but I do want to pick your brain about this a little bit more. So this is a good question here. Mechanical Frog says, any possibility you'll revisit the third test universe that you've created?
Well, first, hi. I'd like to thank the cult member who indoctrinated me into the Church of BattleTech. He's to blame right there. Um, I will say yes. That is actually my goal. Among the Juniper Trees is a planned duology, but I'm actually gonna release that, and then I'm gonna revisit the world of Cassian and Breccia, hopefully in 2025. It's going to be a story set about 5 years after the first book. And it's primarily going to be expanding on the relationship between Cassian, which is the core world, and Breccia, which earned its independence through a rather quick but rather nasty civil war. So I'm hoping to be expanding on their relationship. Like I mentioned before, I'm going to be sort of looking into the history of the Berlin Stockade as inspiration for the relationship between the two. A lot of Cold War antics, but mostly trying to dive deeper into that, how the Mitrite works, and just everything in between. Because I know that was a common, I don't want to say not a complaint, but a request from people who read the third test was to have the world expanded on a little bit more. And
Guilty.
so I'm more than happy to hear feedback from people, and that's really inspiring a lot of what's going to happen in the second book when that comes around.
Excellent. I look forward to it. I can hardly wait, but we will with bated breath for that one. So let's see the next question. And I'm going to piggyback on Engine Joe's question here real quick. He asks, "Have you read Dragons of Autumn Twilight? What do you like to read when you are not writing, or do you even have time to read when you're not writing?"
Oh, I Dragons of Autumn Twilight. I'm really hoping I'm not gonna lose my nerd card here. it Dragons of Anatria is Raceland and his brother. I don't. Cardamom is a spice. I don't know why cardamom is the name that has come to
You
mind. I
you
was
you
close.
you have
I was close.
literally demonstrated voluminous more knowledge about that book than I have, so
Okay,
don't feel
so
bad.
for context, one of the like weird rent-free things that stays in my head from the Dragonlance series, um, is Raistlin describing how he views the world, and it's actually kind of impacted a lot of my horror writing. Is Raistlin describing how when he looks at people, he like sees them like aging and decaying and falling apart. And I'm like, that's the kind of cool, but also horrific. That concept kind of lives rent free in my head right now. So um I've read books in the Dragonlance universe. I've read a number of the first couple ones in that series. I read the I don't know if you call it a spin-off series, but the one about uh, gosh darn it. I literally have them on my bookshelf in the living room right now. It's the series about like the younger group. It's like the teenagers. It's almost like more young adult than the other ones. I can't remember the name. Someone in the chat needs to be smart for me right now. Um,
There you go. This is your moment, Engine Joe.
this is all you. But I really appreciate Dragons of Autumn Twilight. I love Fizban. I love just the old man antics of Fizban has inspired a couple of characters at the D&D table. Um, I love the red dragon that is in. I want to say is it the first or second book in the Dragonlance series? The red dragon that has mistaken the children that are being held hostage for like her own children, so she just like goes mad and fights the other red dragon at the end. She's amazing. I love her so much. I'm not an expert on it. Please don't quiz me too much. His name isn't cardamom, which is a spice. Um,
It's not Cameroon because I
it's
think that's an
Cameron.
that,
It's something. Engine Joe, you have to be the hero right now. You need
yeah,
you have to be the hero we need, but don't deserve right now in
exactly.
the chat.
Drop
Um,
your shoulder and burst into this burning building because we are
this this
um
this dumpster fire that is a conversation of me trying to remember. I need to reread that. Um, but to answer your piggyback question, um, I read everything and anything I can get my hands on because I think that writers should be doing a lot of cross discipline. Caramon, thank you, thank you. You are the hero right now.
there you go, buddy.
10 points to Gryffindor. Um, so um, recently, to prepare for writing Among the Juniper Trees, I read Shogun for the first time in January. Um, I read Junji Ito manga. I read Jane Austen. Um, what else do I read? Gosh darn it.
Jane Austen, astronaut, a woman barely alive. Sorry, that's I'm bleeding again. Go
You're
ahead.
fine. I read Jane Austen. I read Shogun. Um, I I have currently in my TBR Journey to the West. I read The Nature of Things by Lucretius, at least parts of it. Um, I think that it's important to, especially when reading, to read all sorts. Read, especially when you're writing, I should say, is to read all sorts of things because you kind of can learn things from other genres when it applies to writing your own that you never think of. For example, with poetry, I don't write as much poetry. When I first got into college and I landed a poetry class because I needed it for my degree, I wrote nonsense on a page and people liked it. don't tell my professor. Actually, my first piece I ever got published, and this is true. Please, like this is verifiable. I wrote it as a joke, and it was my first thing I ever got published. Um, it was titled Tim Curry parentheses in drag, and it was my first thing I ever got published. So stupid. It was fun, but it was so stupid that that was the first thing I ever got published.
Oh
That was a
gosh.
cool. Yeah, sorry. Don't hate me in the chat. Don't cancel me. I'm a fake poet. Um, I'll be honest though. During that class, I ended up taking poetry more seriously because I ran into a poet named Daniel Simcoe. He wrote one book. It's called The Arrival.
Hmm.
Um, if you are into poetry, I would read it. It's the it, it's this gentleman, the poet. Um, he was an immigrant from, I forget, it was some kind of European country, and he was basically barred from ever going home. And he finds out that he has, like, I think it was leukemia or something like that, and he's terminal. So the entire book is based around this idea of when I'm gone, what will be left of me.
Hmm.
And it's a really, if you're into poetry, it's a very haunting read. And for me, I learned a lot from poetry where it affected how I write prose. A lot of people like how I write, and that's because I've embraced poetry a little bit. I think prose should be a little bit like a dance. It should be a little musical. The words themselves should like ebb and flow and create like a lull and a give and a take with when you're reading. And that's part of that like cross disciplinary thing that I mentioned, where
Yeah.
you can learn a lot of things from different genres and mediums if you take some time to experience it.
Well, that I I am not smart enough to enjoy poetry by
Me
and
neither.
large.
Me neither.
I'm happy that I can get a hand on Frost. You know, it's like
Right. And I'll be honest, I don't go out of my way to get into a lot of poetry nowadays. Particularly since I'm not really involved in academia anymore and I don't have to go out. Um, I don't have to go out anymore. Um, I'm so glad I'm out of college. Academia is dumpster fire, but that's all I'll say on that. But Daniel Simcoe's work, I do genuinely appreciate it because it's not really. I feel like a lot of poetry, particularly modern poetry, has a real pretentiousness about it.
mhm.
It's why I like going back to things like Lucretius, who wrote in on the nature of things, and it's like about cell theory told through poetry, and that's interesting to me. Um, and that kind of thing. But poetry is really like take it or leave it. There's a reason why I don't have a lot of poetry in my second and third books, because people talk to me and they were like, I really just don't get the poetry. And I'm like, you know what? You are the customer and you are correct. So I think I have one or two pieces maybe in Pleasant Little Moments and Stress Fractures. But if my audience really just doesn't get the poetry, they don't get the poetry, and that's fine. Like just hear the feedback from people and adjust and give them what they want.
Well, surely as though I appreciate that mindset, but surely there. I mean, and we talked about grind set versus muse. There has to be a point at which you can you can let your muse breathe. And how do you strike that balance?
Um, okay, not to sound like a character from an H.P. Lovecraft story. I just kind of just listen to like the weird dreams that I have, and I'll go with that.
Fair
Uh,
enough.
Yeah, there's one story concept that I want to work with right now that was originating from a nightmare. Not to get like ooh on you. I remember I had this dream once where I'm in this giant tunnel system that is like below the surface of the earth, and it's very much like in the mountains of madness kind of thing that the Shuggas have like carved out, but it's all like
Mhm.
subway tile all around. And for some reason, I'm roller skating through it. That's part of the, the dream of it. And I'm in a crowd, and all of a sudden, I see someone that I think I recognize, and I wave hi. I think he's like some sort of famous actor, and I move on with my life. Turns out he's like a serial killer that has been like wanted by the news, and he's gonna try to kill me. And that was one of my dreams one night. Either so I just listen to the music in that kind of way, like wake up, write it down. We'll integrate this somewhere.
We'll find a place for this tour. Subway tile Shoggoth tunnel skating rink. Right.
For some reason, this place is called Scotland, but I've been to Scotland before. This doesn't look like it. Like it's just those kind of
Uh,
oddball things, um, in Stress Fractures, there's this story called To Scale, which is about this situation where giant fish have basically risen up out of the depths of the ocean and like basically dissolved the coastline. So there's just these giant fish like swimming through all these high rises, and that was inspired by a dream where I'm just walking around and the world's flooded and a fish comes up and like bites me on the arm, so I punch it in the face. Like that like uh that's how I just let the muse do its work. Like I'll just wake up, write it down. I'll put this right in here somewhere.
excellent. Excellent.
Hope
So is
hope
it
hope this isn't some Lovecraftian thing. It's
little
fine.
deliveries of building blocks that you can then put into the
It's
machine. I
fine.
like it. I like
Yeah.
it. So Mechanical Frog has another question for us. Do you have a favorite word that you like to drop into your work? And what is the most cromulent work to you?
Oh my
Word,
gosh.
rather,
I
word.
feel like if I tell people, they're gonna start seeing it. And if they start seeing it, I'll never hear the end of it. Um, so I like playing around with words. I like using the word static, um, because like having that the sensation of things like shooting out.
Hmm.
I don't know if it's correct, but if Shakespeare can make up words, then so can I. Um, I like static. I like pulling in on a little bit of like Lovecraftian kind of verbiage. I like cyclopean. I like pulling things. I think the word is lintel, which is like the thing right above.
Right. Yes.
Yeah,
Post and lintel door
yeah.
construction.
I like bringing that kind of thing in. Um, I like calling like the time when the world is getting like dark, going from like sunset. I like calling it the new navy because that sounds more interesting than it got dark. Um,
Mm.
like the new navy of night. So there's a couple different things I like using. I probably should make sure I don't use them too often because then it's just going to become a meme on X, and I will never, I'll never hear
Us?
the. Yeah,
No,
you guys,
no,
you guys already assume I'm like 3 feet tall, maybe shorter. So
no. I presume you're at least 3'3" or 3'4". Don't cast aspersions, Alyssa. That can be hobbit forming. Anyway, sorry. I know you've got a bit of a short temper about that, and I don't want to dwarf
wow,
any of our other discussions
wow.
with height jokes. But so thank you, Mechanical Frog. Elvin made in showing a bit of color here as to what her favorite is. Wants to know: have you read The Black Company, and why do you think it's the best fantasy book ever made?
Oh my gosh, you're gonna be very disappointed in me. I'm gonna be kicked from your Discord server. I haven't read The Black Company. I'm so sorry. I know, banned instantly. You'll never talk to me again. Um, in terms of the best fantasy book ever made, that is a very bold claim. Um, I know everyone wants to just shoe in Tolkien. I like Tolkien. I respect Tolkien. He's a very interesting writer, and I have a lot of respect for him. In terms of my personal favorite, um, I would have to go back to my middle school reading days and look at Patricia C. Reed's Dealing with Dragons series. Um, it was kind of one of my formative year things. I actually sent her an email when I was starting to do look into self publishing for advice, and she was like, "Yeah, go for it." And I'm like, she responded to my email. um, but it was a very interesting series. It's very much like old school YA because it's about this princess who's just like, I really don't want to get married off. Can I go get like seek employment? So she actually goes and becomes a secretary for one of the dragons that lives in the area. So she has to uh, deal with dragons, so to speak, where it's about dealing with the interpersonal politics of dragons, of damsels, of the knights that seek them, and wizards who are the villains of the series, and apparently can be melted with water. So that's very
That's
interesting.
having stood in the rain, cutting back tree branches and boarding up my house. We I can confirm we cannot be melted with water.
That's
So
fair. That's fair enough. Um, but I personally that has like lived rent free in my brain for a while, so um, I probably need to go back and reread it. I need to go back and read a lot of those kind of old school books, particularly as I kind of figure out what kind of genre I really want to delve into full time or make my primary genre. But Black Company, I probably need to write that down because I need to become more educated and less dumb. So that's always my New Year's resolution: become less dumb. And one day, one day I'll actually stick to it. So
well, there's an easy one for me to break constantly every day. Um, Zach Zander has been peppering me with author names and a question mark. So I'm just going to say Zach Zander wants to know if you read Moorcock, Robert Jordan, or Martin, George R. R. Martin. I'm assuming
oh,
that's George R. R. Martin and not Dean Martin.
uh, if Dean Martin wrote fantasy books, that would be very interesting. I feel like. Okay, so y'all, just for context, I want people to understand this. So when George wrote his last book, which was in 2014, that was 2 years before I was old enough to vote. So I actually have not yet read any of George R. R. Martin's works. I know that sounds like heresy, but it's kind of like how Stephen King is. Um, I grew up after the craze and into the era where he's become kind of a meme of himself. Um, I watched like the first season or two, like the first season and some change of Game of Thrones. It didn't really catch my interest that much. Um, Not really a fan of full frontal nudity in my face all the time.
Right.
Um, so for me personally, I just got in after the craze and since he's become a meme. So and then it's just like, do I really want to get into it because I know the series is never going to get finished, and it's kind of like I've read enough excerpts where I'm like, do I even want to read this? Do I want this in my mental headspace? Um, because the mind is a terrible thing to lose. So I probably need to probably maybe read some of his like shorter works, that kind of thing. But um, I I'm sorry to say I have missed a lot of um, classic fantasy. I will say one that I've enjoyed and I want to get into more. I think it's something about the Black Sun by C.S. Friedman.
Mm-hmm.
I have one of his books that I read and enjoyed immensely. I just need to get into it more. I also need to get into more Terry Pratchett. I read Mort a couple years ago, and that was a lot of fun. Um, but I've been trying to. just get into more reading. It's just a very difficult. It's like trying to eat an elephant. Like, where do you start with some of these authors who have huge bibliographies, and then on top of that, trying to support your fellow indie authors. So my TBR has steadily grown the more I've interacted with people online. Um, Also, speaking of fantasy, if you guys haven't read the Lord Otter's book, I think it's why can't I remember the name off the top of my head? But if you go to Lord Otter on Twitter, he's a friend of mine. He wrote a really good classic sword and sorcery book. Um, I'd recommend it if you have the time or inclination. Just to shout out a friend of mine.
Well, that's excellent. We approve
Yeah.
heartily of shout outs here on this channel of good stuff. Um, so let's see. Speaking of shout outs though, and reading and writing and that sort of thing. We were discussing this just before we went live.
Yeah.
You've got quite the book deal going on right now, as in a deal for those looking for some damn fine stuff to read. Tell
Yeah.
us about that.
Um, so right now, until I think the end of the day, because Amazon's sale stuff is a little tricky. Till end of the day, Pleasant Little Moments and Stress Fractures is actually 99 cents in ebook format. So if you're interested in trying some stuff out and you don't really want to break the bank, those are available to you, I believe, through the end of today. So yeah, go ahead and check that out if you have the inclination to do so.
All right, I will. You know what? I'm gonna be a guy about this, and I'm gonna drop a link because it's right there. Now I am not an Amazon affiliate. Are you an Amazon affiliate, Alyssa?
No, I just
Okay.
I just get royalties when people buy
Okay.
things.
Well, there is the link. I'll throw it up on screen for you guys if you want to check that out. The actual where you go to get that deal for the rest of the day, I think, is linked over on the right. So yeah, check that out. Definitely give that give that a look. Let's check the questions. Engine Joe having a question for you here. It says, now that you've been in the academic nightmare that is modern college, what can you recommend to people to skip this nonsense?
All right, so I've had a lot of people ask me about the academic mess that is currently the case. I think personally, um, especially now that I have started cash flowing a lot of my stuff, I tell people, um, don't go broke chasing your dream. Um, One of the greatest tools that I got from being in college, and I think this kind of made it worth it for me, is that I got to have, I basically paid to have time to sit down with other people to talk about our work and go over it and get some good feedback and that kind of thing. I had the time to write and it was focused in. Um, I will say though, um, if you have time to write or you already have a writing group, a lot of the times you don't. I wouldn't pay thousands of dollars to go get an English degree right now. Um, I think that there are ways to grow and improve in your craft without going to school for it necessarily. Um, and to give you a little bit of peek into my villain arc story, um, I had the opportunity to pursue my master's. Um, And when I went to the school, that would have cost me about $60,000, um, thereabouts. They were teaching them how to do like cover letters in a master's level course. So for me personally, it's a case of uh, college is what you make of it. I wouldn't get into debt. I wouldn't um, get a student loan over an English degree, particularly if you just want to learn how to write. If you don't want to like go to school, Um, if you don't want to teach, I should say, if you don't want to do something that requires you to have a certification sit in your hand saying I went to school, I have the diploma. Um, there are plenty of courses online that are far less expensive that can teach you how to write. Um, there are plenty of between YouTube and all these other schools and mediums. There are plenty of ways. I also recommend reading excessively, because one thing I've noticed is that my writing becomes better when I read old school books. Like, for example, when I read Shogun, it really helped sort of focus me in to write Among the Juniper Trees. Um, so my suggestion is, and I'm going back to your question, if you want to learn how to write, start with YouTube, start with things like that. And if you feel like your local university or has a program that would help you improve, then I would then maybe invest at that point. But that's only if you're financially able to do it. I wouldn't recommend people going into debt over a college degree. I was very fortunate in being able to avoid that, but just with the state of things right now, if you don't absolutely need that piece of paper to pursue your dream, I would have that be like the second option. Um, if you want to avoid flipping burgers, I would honestly trade school. Trade school is
Yeah.
between trade school and IT. There are a lot of opportunities in those fields, where you can start off and learn a valuable skill and be making a good portion of money. And then once you have a couple of years in there, take that time to dream, sock some money aside. If you want to go to school after that, you can cash flow it. But genuinely speaking, I like state of the economy. I can't reasonably tell people to go into debt to get the degree that I got, because I just think that would be it's unnecessary at this point.
Right on. Right on. Well, uh there's the lowdown, and I hope that answers your question, Engine Joe. So I I am just I have been itching to pick your brain about gaming all night. Can I ask you some gaming questions?
All right, here we go.
Here
All
we
right,
go. All
uh,
right, we're moving.
disclaimer, guys. I'm not an expert. I have strong opinions. I'm not an expert, so take everything
Okay.
I say with a grain of salt.
No, no, that's okay. So well, I think a fun transition might be this. Do you particularly when it comes to the genre of fantasy, and I know you talked about how strongly influenced you were by Shogun, but is there anything at the gaming table that you ever pick up and you're like, oh, this has got to go in?
Um, so there's actually a collection that I um have kind of in my back pocket right now, and I'm trying to figure out when to work on it, if I'm ready to work on it, that kind of thing. There is a character in my first book. The story's called A Gambler City,
Hmm.
that I actually brought into a short lived Vampire the Masquerade campaign.
I know the character you're talking about. I think
Uh,
that's one
Do-
of my favorites.
Dr. Amelia Frost, the
Yes.
vampire who runs the Vensane Clinic. I love her. Her story is actually continued. She makes more appearances in Stress Fractures, in a mini series called Sanguine. That's the mini series about a mom who becomes a vampire to keep her kids out of the foster care system, and she actually ends up working for Dr. Amelia Frost. Um, I have a collection I'm working on right now where I want to actually expand on her as a character and the world that she lives in. Maybe bring it into some crossovers with the emergency necromancy service. Um, because I feel like she and Mart, Martin and Stewart from the ENS, it would be a very interesting colliding of two worlds in that.
Oh yeah.
Um, But um, so that's one area. I think I don't know. It's very odd to describe. Um, when it comes to the TTRPG table, I keep it kind of separate from where from the gaming table, because there's almost like a superstition of mine at this point. Whenever I try to develop the character outside of the game, the campaign ends.
Oh no.
Yeah.
I think that's something as gamers we've all faced. It's like you hear about a game and maybe you even get to play one game and you're like, this character is going to be so cool, man. This is going to be, and it's what I call the don't buy a miniature and paint it. That's a surefire way for your character to die
Yeah, it's
thing. You know, the
it
more you invest in it, the more likely it is that the one-off
don't
pickup game.
don't make character art either. Don't
Yeah,
make it like that's the surefire way that that character's gonna die.
no miniature, no character arc, no backstory that you will kill, if not the character, but
The camp,
also the campaign.
yeah. So that's kind of what happened. Kind of what happened with Dr. Frost. But it's kind of why I am like, okay, when do I revisit her? Um, because it's a great story in a great world, and I was planning on it being called like the Frost Collection, and her story being told like vignette style over a series of short stories, um, where she is basically coming to terms with the fact that she no longer lives in a world where being a vampire automatically makes you the top of the food chain. Um, because now there are like these vampire hunters are actually armed now and dangerous, and people are more educated and things like that. And even though she's a vampire, she's a doctor. Like she's not Alice from Underworld. She's a doctor. Like
Right.
that's literally her thing. So it's her having to come to terms with the fact that the world is very different, than when she's how she started her business, and she's now in the process of having to hire a delivery man who actually can make it to the delivery. Um, just I was hoping to make that collection like a series of short stories about her hiring different delivery men and the process of that and how that works. And then at the throughout this story, eventually building to her having to deal with a person from her backstory that she actually needs help from these delivery men in order to deal with. Um, so that's a collection I have in my back pocket that came from the TTRPG table, but I don't know when that's going to come up. Um, and there's been a couple other characters where I'm like, I would love it if I could get this character in a book or a short story. But part of what makes a TTRPG character great is the interactions with other characters. And there is like a weird line of, can I use this other person's character that they've made in this story? Like it gets kind of odd there. So for me, I've been taking more like the archetypes that I've played and then integrating that into my stories and things like that.
Right on. Right on. Has your kind of recent discovery of BattleTech, has that have you given any thought into power armor or big stompy robots in future Alyssa Hazel works?
Well, um, so I'm in this weird position where I think it's neat,
Well,
but
adjust your chair. That'll help.
adjusting my yes, that helps me answer my question. Um, I genuinely like the BattleTech universe. It reminds me of like what Game of Thrones really should have been culturally. I don't know if it
Mm,
is Game of Thrones is still that culturally post like all this kind of falling out post the TV series, but um, I think I like how the interactions between the different groups work. I like, for example, I've read 4 books so far in the BattleTech universe. All of them are very pro Jade Falcon. So I guess I'm in that group now. Um, but I've really enjoyed the sort of exploration of a culture that is wildly different in terms of morality, and the writer really doesn't condemn or condone it. He just writes it. So for to me, that's as strong of an influence um, as anything else. Now, the big stompy mech thing, that that is a hard question because I love the big stompy mechs.
Mm,
But if I introduce the big stompy mechs, that's going to be a completely different. That would be a big genre shift right in the middle of the story.
right.
Um, right now, the third test is very much more. Um, it's not really soft science fiction, but it's not really military sci-fi, hard sci-fi. So if it was introduced, it would be kind of like Easter eggy, or very much like when they get to Brechia, they might have some what's the word for it? Some of the like cargo lift people or things like that, which may end up being more of an alien reference than anything else. Aliens, I should say.
Right.
Um,
Right. So a work mech kind of thing,
yeah,
just an exoskeleton
yeah,
for carrying stuff around. I gotcha.
yeah.
I
And
gotcha.
it's like I really like this thing, but integrating this thing into what I already have would probably mess up the balance of what I have,
Sure,
if
sure.
that
No,
makes sense.
no, it makes perfect sense. And I don't. Are you a fan of the works of Keith Laumer?
Uh, I feel really bad because I feel like half the time when people ask me the names, I'm like, I like the Gandalf GIF where it's like, I have no memory of this.
Yeah, I have no memory of
Um,
this.
yeah.
Um, okay, so briefly, Lawmer worked in a lot of different genres, of course, but he worked primarily in science fiction, and he introduced the bolo, and the
Mm,
bolos are anywhere from 75 to 32,000 ton artificially intelligent main battle tanks.
mm.
Um, and I mean,
Good decision. I
I
like these.
I'm interviewing you, so we're not
No,
going
no,
down the
no,
bolo
no,
rabbit hole.
no. That's
But
fine. I think I don't know if I mentioned this to people before. I try to in this chaotic world of mine, treat my mind like a sieve. Like anything can go through. I'll collect relevant information and like store it in my filing cabinet to use at a later time.
right
But
on.
yeah, yeah,
But he also wrote a comedy series, the Retief stories, and they're about an adjutant to the terrestrian diplomatic corps, and they are just tongue-in-cheek funny. It is obvious that Lawmer worked for the U.S. government through reading the escapades of Retief and how he saves the day, gets the girl, but also cheats you at cards and steals your whiskey. And the girl he got was probably betrothed to you before he showed up. But they are set ostensibly in the same universe as the Bolos, and the
yeah,
Bolo universe is very grimdark. The Retief stories are very, very
yeah,
lighthearted, and uh, it's made mention in one of the stories that the bad guys may have suborned a Bolo's programming and are using it as a weapon, but he doesn't turn it into a Bolo book.
mm,
You know,
yeah,
um, so I guess that is a balance there that you
yeah.
have to strike when you see ooh cool hardware and they're like no character development.
Yeah. And for me personally, I think I like the Stompy Max, but I also like learning more about the world and the characters and the culture. And I think um as much as I would like to write like the big Stompy Mac things, um I'm not mechanically minded enough. Like I cried my way through math and chemistry to get the Stompy Mech feel
Right.
give it the gravitas it needs. But I do like learning about the culture, and I feel like that's something I can more easily execute.
Right.
So if I do end up the words, if I do end up integrating the mechs into my stories, I want to give it the process and the time it deserves, if that makes sense.
No,
Um,
that makes perfect sense. That I get it. I understand, and it is a fine line to walk. And I
and
think, uh,
and I feel like from what I've learned of the BattleTech community so far, they're very open to a lot of people, which I'm really enjoying, and they're very positive. I also feel like what I've learned is that there are people who kind of co-opt it and like do whatever they want with it without respecting the heart of BattleTech, which
yeah,
is true, I think, of any group. I don't want to be a grifter. I don't want to be a tourist. If I'm gonna write something BattleTech related, I want to do it right. So that's part of the other reason why I'm holding off on it until I learn more about it. Like, so if that makes sense.
no, that makes perfect sense. Just when it comes to BattleTech, just remember nothing after 30 matters or counts. So
I got 3 more years then.
yeah, sorry, I am not a uh I like Road Warrior with big stompy robots more
Oh,
than I like
I'll never I'll never get my blood name at this point. I
I do.
just I just steal my name by marrying somebody.
I do want to. I do want to put this up here real quick. Elvin asked if she could send you a DM. I think she's gone now. I think she's left the chat
Okay.
for need of sleep. So she has requested of you a moment of your time.
Uh,
Um,
yeah, go ahead and if I don't know if she's still uh in the go ahead and DM me. I keep things open with my mutuals. I tend to vet things a little bit when it comes to who can send me DMs, so feel free to send it. It might be a yes, it might be a no, but I don't mind people asking questions.
okay. Of course, you probably got to be panically wondering right now, why did I answer his DM? But
Oh no, no, you're fine. You're fine.
I'm
Um,
fine. But gosh, let's see. So uh, what do you love about Dungeons and Dragons, and why is it first edition advanced Dungeons and Dragons that you're going to start playing more of?
all right, so I gotta time travel a little bit here. Um, my first system I ever remember playing was I think I was around 8 years old, and it was Castles and Crusades.
Well, that's
So
okay. There's plenty of time to get on the right track, but go on.
um, so I I kind of want to reword your question, if I might, to TTRPGs
Okay.
in general,
All right.
if that's fair. Because Dungeons and Dragons, full disclosure, I played a wide variety of systems. Um, my first system was Castles and Crusades, followed by Hero. I've played Fantasy Age. I've played Savage Worlds. I've played the Ubiquity system.
Mhm.
I've played a wide range of systems. So um, I think I personally enjoy different systems for different reasons. I've also played Astonishing Swordsman and Sorcerers of Hyperborea. If
Mhm.
you guys like old school, that's another very
Yeah,
old school tune
we
system.
are we are big fans of Jeff Talanian around
Yeah.
here. He is a
Um,
great guy.
yeah, he and my dad are friends, so
Nice.
I kind of got introduced to the system through my dad. And I think not to get mushy and sentimental on a Saturday night, part of the reason I love TTRPGs is that's how my dad and I spent a lot of time together growing up. And I think it was how I learned how storytelling works. I think that's how I got close to my dad, and I liked being able to just go out and do adventures because, as previously discussed, I'm 2 foot 3, I'm 2'3".
In lifts, right? In lifts.
In heels, in my platform go-go boots. So, me going out and doing it on like some types of adventures are just never gonna happen. So, me being able to go out and be like a 5'11" barbarian lady, which was actually my first character was named Kara the Barbarian,
Nice.
and I was a barbarian. Very creative name choice. Um, just being able to go out and experience something new, or even with the Ubiquity system, I really like the Indiana Jones style pulp adventure kind of feel. So Ubiquity was one I enjoyed a lot. Um, so for me, it's about going out and having adventures and just experiencing something new, and getting closer with a couple of people. Because I feel like when you get to a TTRPG table, you learn more about people and than you think you would. Like I also like met my husband at a TTRPG table, so it's
There
been,
you go.
yeah, it's been a way I've gotten close to a lot of good people in my life. So for me, um, it's gotten me out of my shell. It's gotten me connecting with people. It's gotten me experiencing adventures. I got to say very out of pocket things, which is a lot of fun.
There you go.
Um, so recently, one example, I played. We were doing a brief Star Wars campaign, and as the Star Wars system was success based, and I played an ex Imperial agent who wanted to retire, so he faked his death, and now he's just pretending to be like this like senile old man. And so we're trying to distract these guards, and the pilot is like escorting me around like I'm like an old man. And so she says something about uh, what was it she said? She said something about, oh, I'm taking dad around and showing him all of these things, and uh, I just look at the DM and say, my wife died here. It's was funnier in the moment probably, but everyone was just dying, because it was just the weirdest thing, and I'm like, what would a little old man say to a stranger?
Yeah, yeah, that tracks. Definitely.
my my wife died here.
I had pudding today.
But just where else would you be able to look at another adult human being?
Sober, very few
Very
places.
few, very few.
Yes. Um, so we have a it's less of a question, more of a request.
Okay.
And John Miller says, tell the story of how you met your husband playing an RPG. If
Okay.
you want
All
to,
right.
let me
All
put
right.
the caveat there.
Let,
If she wants
sure.
to.
I'll give you a. I'll try to give a not really condensed, but okay. So in let's see. Trying to remember. Okay, so in January of like 2022, I broke up with the guy that I thought was gonna be it. So I was like, okay, I met him through like Discord and online gaming. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna just cut the apron strings. I need to go out. I need to do things. I need to start dating again. But most of all, let's just start gaming and no dating, no boyfriends from the gaming pool. I'm gonna go in and just make buddies. That's the goal. So, um, I came into my local comic book shop, and I gamed there for a couple months. I chose to like dress like a gremlin because again, we're not attracting boys here. I'm one of the guys. So I bring potato chips to the first time I remember bumping into my husband. Um, we're at the table, and I'm like, I had an allergic reaction from one of these types of chips, and I'm like, here, eat these chips, and I just give them these potato bags of chips. And apparently he thought I was cute at that point, so mission failure immediately.
Task failed successfully.
Yeah. So things kind of went from there. We got to talking. And not to speak unkindly about the other young men at the shop, but he was one of the few people that I felt um, wasn't starting a conversation either ogling me or trying to impress me. Like was actually having a conversation with me like a normal human being. He had confidence. And time for the turn of the century. I'm talking to him, and we're talking about different things. It's kind of like the Dow Jones report. Like first we start off by talking about Tolkien, then we start talking about C.S. Lewis, and then we start talking about Adventures in Odyssey and church, and things keep going up. Then we start talking about guns. I told him, yeah, I have my own piece, and he's like, "Oh, I'm not old enough to own a gun yet." And I was like, "What? What? What is going on here? This man has a full beard. I think he's like 22, 23, and I'm like, what? Do I need to leave now? Do I need to be?
Do you need me to call your mom?
Do I need to call the police on myself? Like, what's going on here? So I ask him, how old are you? And he says 19. And I hear like, the screaming goat sound effect? That was it. He asked how old. I'm 25 at this time. Now, for context, he talked about being employed full time and being out of college. So I had some reasonable assumptions. I actually leave the table, go outside, and call my mother. And I just tell Mom, he's 19. And her words were, don't throw him out yet. So, long story short, there was a stretch where I was engaged to a teenager, and I wanted to die a little on the inside. I bought some stuff that was cheetah print as a joke too. Because you have to, when you get to that point, because I also promised myself I was not going to date a guy who was younger than me again. So
well, so you just bat zero.
Yeah. But thankfully he's not a teenager anymore, which was nice. And I'm 27 now and he's 20, so it's less awkward. But no, he's just been amazing. And the ironic thing is actually that's how my mom and dad met. My dad was home. He was playing games with his one of his gaming buddies and TTRPG, and my uncle, who's my uncle. So my mom comes downstairs. She's home from college, and asks something and leaves. And then I think my dad said something to the effect of, "Is that your sister?" And my uncle's like, "Yeah. Can I date her?" Sure. So it's now 2 generations of people meeting people at gaming tables. So
there you go. You got, I gotta share this with you. My father-in-law had a massive collection of Avalon Hill tabletop games. So yeah, he was a tabletop gamer, and like that the house that my wife lived in, that was literally the first thing that greeted you when you walked into the living room, was this cubicle furniture structure with, I mean, if 3M or Avalon Hill published it between like 1965 and 1975, he had a copy up there. It was madness.
Yeah, we're
So
we're planning on getting our own cubicles in the next little bit and filling that with some
there
gaming
you
stuff too.
there you go. There you go. But Daniel Rowan wants to know what kind of chips, manufacturer, and flavor. It only works the once, Daniel. You gotta.
How do you summon a gamer girl? Is I think that's his actual question. I'm trying to remember. Um, I have food allergies, so I think it was like some type of like limited edition thing I got from Ollie's from Lay's. So I'm so sorry. It may never come to be again.
There you go.
Um, but if I can give any dating advice in general, it's drop your type, because if I had been like, well, he's 19, this is done, this is over. I would be 27, not married, and not planning a future together with my spouse. And I've just, again, not to get sentimental on a Saturday night, but I just feel so incredibly blessed to have him. And he's just been amazing. And um, for being as young as he is, he's very mature, and he's treated me incredibly well. And that's really all. But besides roasting me occasionally with my dad, because now they're co-conspirators. Um, but he's just been an amazing husband. And I really can't ask for anything better. So it's just um, sometimes you just gotta drop assumptions and drop types, and you find the person that you end up with. So
Well, there you go, and that is absolutely wonderful, and I think that's the meta girl at the game store story that all you young men out there should aspire to. I do want to ask you something though, and this is a little personal, not
yeah,
personal of you, but
sure.
family personal. How old's your dad?
So my dad is in his early 60s. So
Oh, thank goodness! If you had said, "Oh, he's 55," I would just be, good night, folks. Gone and found a nice stout length of rope or something. And oh,
no,
my palm lock is flashing. The Sandmen are going to take me to a carousel.
no, no. No, he's early 60s. He's very much an old school gamer. He
Good,
introduced me to Conan and Edgar Rice Burroughs' stuff. And
excellent.
no,
Uh, any
he's the whole reason I'm as cultured as I am.
excellent.
Unfortunately, I did
Any
play
Fritz
Tiefling
Lieber?
Bard at some point. So sorry.
Oh, well. Any Fritz Lieber? You read any Lieber?
Ah, okay. Now, the worst part is that's a name I recognize, but it's like, again, not to be a zoomer and uh, only know things via meme. Um, but give me a second. Fritz Lieber. Dang it.
Fofford and Gray Mouser.
Okay, Gray Mouser, the name I recognize. I may have read one of his books. I have a really eclectic collection. So sometimes I'll have one book from one person.
Mm,
Um, my dad probably has like all of them lined up, but um, I got my Agatha Christie here, and I got a couple assorted Star Trek books for some reason, and then BattleTech, and it's just a weird eclectic mix of seven different things.
right on. It's all good. It's all good.
Yeah.
So, you now I one thing I've noticed, like, because we interact on Twitter, we
Mhm.
BS
Yeah.
and meme at each other on Twitter, and
Yeah.
it's lots of fun. But there's a lot of times when I'm like, oh wait, she's off doing, I'm not going to DM you while you're hustling your books out there and anything. So you are kind of all over the place then, now that
Yeah.
the nuptials. What's coming up? Where can folks get autographed Alyssa Hazel works?
Well, I have a couple things coming up soon. Um, Next weekend, I'm gonna be at the Birmingham meadery in Milford, Delaware. Going to be at the Halloween night market in downtown Salisbury the weekend after that. Um, then I'm going to be at the Norfolk Anime Convention in November. In December, I will be at the Ocean City Comic Con. I'm actually hoping to next year find a couple places that are a little further out. We're investigating things like there's one in Savannah, Georgia, that we're potentially doing. Um, so there's a couple different things, but I'm mostly going to be in the Virginia, Maryland area right now. On Facebook, I tend to keep things pretty up to date on events that I'm going to be at. So if people want to follow that a little bit closer, they can just go on Facebook and follow me there. I also am very, probably to the point of annoyance, very proficient about mentioning when I'm doing things on X as well. So if you want to follow me there, you will get fairly up to date stuff about when my next events are as well.
All right, I'm gonna put your, let's see, and you know what? When I first started seeing your posts show up on Twitter, even before I threw you a follow, I was like, she seems really interesting. I'm gonna this is very cool. I like checking out cool people's stuff. I literally the next day I was like, did I just imagine that? Because ALYSSA, one, two S's, Hazel. I was like, it's not. What in the hell? So, but it's three S's.
Yeah, well, I
ALY.
tried getting author Alyssa Hazel, and for some reason that didn't work. So I was like, Alyssa Hazel. And part of that is I don't want to call my ex profile a little bit more deranged, but it's a lot more off the cuff than my Facebook and Instagram posts are, to be honest. I talk about a wider variety of topics. I don't want to say it ever gets spicy, but there are things that you can put on X that would be normal that on Facebook would get some pearls clutched.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
Yeah. So I tend to be more active on X, generally speaking. Um, so if you're interested in the memes, follow me on X. If you're interested for events, follow me on Facebook. Those are the two best places to get information about where I'm going to be.
Jokes on you. I follow you both places, but you know, 'cause I like the memes and I like to know where you are
Yeah.
at all times, because the chance that you could attack my shin with a mace is
It, it's
low,
it, it, but never
but
negligible.
never zero. Um, but no, so Jay Tyler came in, and I cannot remember if I asked you about this particular author before. But Jay Tyler, have you ever read any Michael Moorcock, any of the
Oh,
Ulrich stories?
I finally can redeem myself a little bit. I actually have a very long time ago. I need to get back into it. I started reading, I think the first Elric book. I don't know why. I don't know if I just kind of just had like a squirrel moment. I don't think I ever finished it.
Mm.
But I feel like there's like a renaissance. Wait, am I okay? Actually, never mind. Scratch that. I'm gonna disappoint you guys again. Elric, haven't read. Drizzt was actually the one I've been thinking of. I don't know why I confused the two. Please
Oh,
don't
that
hate me.
is.
Don't kill me, guys. I only have so much time to read, and please don't destroy me in the comments below. I don't know why my brain. If it makes you guys feel any better, there was this one day where I mentally swapped King Kong and Godzilla, and that was the most embarrassing moment of my life. So just letting you guys in on a little secret, my brain is terrible. Um, I do need to read both. Like I mentioned, I need to. Um, one place where my education has been sorely lacking is getting into these more classic high fantasy adventure stuff.
Mhm.
The stuff I read more of is probably like the YA kind of stuff, like I was mentioning Patricia C. Reed, Dragonlance Chronicles kind of stuff. I wouldn't call Dragonlance YA, but more along that kind of line. Um, but I've tried reading Sword of Shannara, and my brain, for some reason, just didn't catch on to it. Dune is also on my TBR. I started reading that, and I was just like, this is really dry. I don't I don't know if I'll make it. But since I've read Shogun, which was well over 1,000 pages, I think my brain is finally like the rot that starts in your brain after you get out of middle school, where reading longer books becomes more of an issue. Um, I think my mind is mentally prepared to go back into it. So right now, I'm reading through Satan's Petting Zoo, which is a one by an indie author that I ran into at a convention. It's kind of interesting. It's like lycanthropes, but with like rabbits. So fun times.
I'm
Um,
getting some strong Watership Down vibes.
yeah, yeah. I confused Drizzt and Elric and want to throw myself off a bridge right after I do so. But I reread Watership Down, at least partially, every year. No, no exceptions. So clearly, I have my priorities straight, guys.
Well,
Um,
I mean, clearly you've fallen down a rabbit hole with that novel, but
yeah, that's true. I don't know why it lives rent free in my brain. It's like it's a constant. Like, what would Bigwig do? Like,
I have I've literally seen like the last 15 minutes of the cartoon, so that I it's one of those things that I intend to read one day, but I have not gotten
it's
around to.
I would say Richard Adams is probably in the course of Watership Down. And a side note, I hope I haven't disappointed you guys too much at my lack of reading classic fantasy. I will go commit seppuku after this interview is over to cleanse my shame. But coming back to it, Watership Down to me is probably the best world building that I have ever read in a book, particularly because you can ignore the sort of the appendix stuff at the end where it tells you all the translation of the words, because by the time you get to the end of the book you can read a full sentence in the rabbit language. Contextually, he does a really great job of showing you what words mean without telling you directly what they mean.
Mm.
um, so it's really a fascinating study in terms of world building if you ever want to read a good example of that. I think that's probably why I enjoyed coming back to the story so much, is because it's a kind of a simple tale told in a very complex and like it's not nihilistic, but it's a very realistic, gritty, kind of dark story,
Mm.
but with like a very simple, hopeful theme by the end. And there's something very much linked to humanity in the story about rabbits. I don't know. It lives rent free in my brain. I need to add Elric. Okay, so far it's Elric, not Drizzt. Again, my apologies. I am actually the worst. Elric, Drizzt, and the Black Company. Okay, so these three are my new essential reads. Please.
Fofford and Gray Mouser.
Okay, all right.
Fofford.
I need to just open up a Google Doc at this point.
Yes,
Uh,
I will actually outside the scope of the show. I will tell you, um, you are now, by dint of us being associated through social media, you are now 5 steps removed from Fritz Lieber.
oh no,
I
I'm so sorry.
I mean that in the most direct sense, and I'll tell you, which puts you 6 steps removed from H.P. Lovecraft. Not kidding about that.
I'm so sorry, Fritz.
But Dying Breed Tabletop actually had a question.
Okay.
We've kind of touched on some of this. I know Dying Breed, you came in a little bit later, but if there's any points, any nuance to Dying Breed's question that we did not touch on, Alyssa, I think this is a banger of a question from him. So this is, how do the different things you've read influence your own writing? and any authors that you've recently discovered, tonight doesn't count, that influence your creative efforts.
Okay. Um, I will say everything I read, regardless of genre, comes into my writing in some ways. Whether it's Jane Austen stuff, the kind of the satire, the dry wit, the like ladies, like how ladies go to war with each other using their words kind of thing. Whether it's, for example, Battletech with the different societies and clans clashing with each other constantly in the vie for power and how different groups work together. Um, Nonfiction books that I've read, over a lot of my first three books, I've mentioned it before, um, happened right before COVID started, in the middle of COVID, and the last book came out in, I think, like 2022, somewhere in there. So those three books especially were influenced by the nonfiction I was reading at the time. Um, I like to refer to that time of my life as my character building arc. Um, I went through a lot of growing pains because I just got out of
Sure.
college and like then the world went to heck. Um, Lost a lot of friends, gained some new ones. Had to really like look myself in the mirror in a lot of things in my life. So I read a lot of nonfiction. I read stuff like Boundaries and like some old dating books and like something called Safe People by Dr. Henry Cloud. And a lot of that and how people relate to each other and things like that actually went into the horror stories in Stress Fractures as well. Um, so I think you can pull inspiration from a lot of different things. I mentioned before that when I started writing Among the Juniper Trees, I knew this was going to be something a lot more ambitious than what I'd normally been doing. And I knew that I needed to get back into reading. So I actually talked to a gentleman at MarsCon. He's a very awesome guy. Again, my brain is like Swiss cheese, so forgive me. Um, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. But he said when I was describing what it was, he recommended Shogun, and this was actually before the show was announced, and I started seeing the trailers for it. So I was like, okay, let me make it a goal to have the book finished by the time I watched it before I watched the show. So that was a marathon through in January, and I'll say um, it greatly influenced how I'm going to look at Among the Juniper Trees, not just from a storytelling perspective of like the different political factions, um, but it also looked in terms of how to write again and how to write longer pieces of fiction. So James Clavell, Junji Ito, I know he's a mangaka author, but I'm very inspired by him in terms of like body horror and like mental, like your mind becoming warped and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Um, so I draw inspiration from all the different things. Um, so yeah.
Um, yeah, Ito is such a great writer. It feels, you know, when he's writing, like his story was made for you. Like you have to go in to his works, like they were made for you.
Yeah. Um, I first discovered him. Sorry, I just had a little coffee.
No, that's
Um,
okay.
I first discovered Junji Ito right out of college. So I started collecting his stuff pretty quickly. There was just something about his work and how he brought in like the strange oddities to everyday life. And I think what was interesting about it was that it was particularly um, Japanese, and I think a lot of my most recent stuff has been influenced by Japanese culture, South Pacific folklore, that kind of thing. It's been a current kind of fascination of mine is actually South Pacific folklore. There's a podcast called Ghost Maps
Hmm.
that I will binge. If you want to find it on Spotify, they're great. It's basically an anthology series focusing on South Pacific uh, folklore, particularly hungry ghosts, Pontiacs. I think I said that wrong because a Pontiac is a car, but
Yes.
it's spelled with a K at the end, so it looks like the same word. The good news is I am very quiet, so I don't think they're expecting me to say it right. But I'm just fascinated by it because when you look at horror from a Western perspective, a lot you see a lot of the same things. We specialize in slasher villains. We specialize in like the same type of ghosts, vampires. Like we have very strong archetypes. When you look at stuff like Junji Ito or even South Pacific folklore, a lot of it is very fresh and very vibrant and very new, which
Mhm.
is why I like diving into that culture and like learning how to um, create new twists on our classic monsters as well.
Now, let me ask you. I keep peppering you with questions about
You're
have you read
fine. You're
this?
fine.
Have you read that? Have you read this? But there is one, and if you haven't read it, I think you would
Okay.
find it
Okay.
fascinating. Now,
Let me
of
pull up
course,
my drive.
you know the of course you're at least passingly familiar with Akira by Katsuhiro Otomo, right? The Japanese manga. It's the gang kids in Neo Tokyo, and one of them gains mind
Let,
powers.
let me grab my list. Can you spell that out?
Uh,
I
Akira, Akira.
Oh, Akira.
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't watched it yet. It's
Okay.
been on my radar. The I recently heard a video essay about that. I do a lot of video essays nowadays just so I can listen to it almost podcast style. Um, but I haven't watched that one. I did actually read the first volume of Drifting Classroom for the first
Hmm.
time and Fist of the North Star recently. So those are really fascinating.
Good classic ones. The reason I brought up Akira was not to
Mhm.
discuss Akira, which it's a
Okay.
wonderful cyberpunk work in its own,
Yeah.
but is Otomo actually did a horror manga that I think you would love, and it's called Domu. Um,
Don't.
I'll Domu, and it is uh, just frightfully creepy. I do recommend Domu if you like your horror and you like your Japanese stuff. Yeah, Domu.
Okay. All right.
Uh,
I have that added to my list.
all right, well there you go. You're never going to get a lick of work done because you're going to be reading all the stuff we've
Well,
sent you.
well, well. Here's the thing. I gotta balance it out. I've actually now that I'm focusing on writing more, I'm trying to designate like, okay, 2 hours of a week you have to read, and it has to be something I, that you have on your TBR. I'm trying to crank through it a little bit more. I have a bunch of books from people I've either met on X or in person at conventions that I picked up.
Hmm.
And I'm just like, I feel really bad that I have a book of yours sitting right there that I need to get to. Um, I have a couple by The Hollows, JP, um, and his wife. My brain is Swiss cheese, like I mentioned, but the Hollows, they're awesome people, and I need to read their books because they are sitting there staring at me every time I walk through the living room. I have a couple other ones from people I've met on X, so I'm trying to make my way through my TBR. So I'm going to add those on.
Okay.
Just keep because I need to read. I feel like there was a portion of my life where I stopped reading, which was a shame. And I
Mm.
think that was because when you get into academia, it's just like you read for school all the time, and it's just like, okay, I want to do something else. But I think if you want to write, you have to read. So
Oh,
yeah,
unquestionably. Nor yeah. I promise you, English is my first language,
you're
guys.
fine. I'm the same way.
Nordic Maelstrom asks, "Have you read Poe's works?"
Oh, finally, somebody have actually read. Oh, thank you so much. That was a what was it? What's that basketball term? Like an easy something.
Easy layup.
Easy layup. Thank you so much. Yes, I have read Poe. I read a lot of Poe actually. Um, I went to the Poe Museum in Richmond last year. No, earlier this year, with the husband actually.
Hmm.
It was a lot of fun. Um, if you're wondering which ones are my favorites, I think Hop Frog and Mask of the Red Death are two of my favorites. I
Solid.
Yeah, I don't think Hop Frog gets talked enough about. I think it's a really cutting satire, and I think that's Poe really he wrote a lot. He wrote creepy stuff, but he wrote really good satire too. I am a firm believer that horror and comedy are two sides of the same coin. Um, because they are I think they're the only two genres that can create like a physiological response in the media consumer. I think that's what I read at some point. Um, but Hop Frog is a lot of fun. Mask of the Red Death is just a classic tale. So, but that those two are really good. Um, his poetry is haunting still. I am also a fan of the adaptations that came in the 60s and the 70s with Vincent Price and Peter
Boris
Lorre.
Karloff, Peter
Yeah,
Lorre. Oh
yeah,
yeah.
like those were just like I think my favorite of that is when they did the Black Cat and
Mhm.
they combined it with the cask of Amontillado. And Peter Lorre is just walling up Vincent Price, and the two of them playing off of each other is probably peak entertainment. We're never going to get anything that good ever again. The drunk and the wine critic going toe to toe. It was just perfect.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Definitely good stuff. Question from Engine Joe: do you utilize AI text to speech to help you visualize your writing, and do you prefer MS Word or Open Office?
So AI is one of those things that people talk a lot about, and it's one of those things where I don't have a firm enough opinion on it yet to really say what I feel, if that makes sense. Um, I kind of have this feeling of if you use, I really don't use AI to write my stuff. Unless you count like using a program like Grammarly to just double check some things. AI to me, if I don't know, it's a very I know the word nuance gets thrown around a lot, um, but AI with writing is kind of one of those tricky businesses. Um, I don't really use it, I guess, to answer your question. I actually just use the Google Drive um, docs. So I'll occasionally go take it into Microsoft Word, just because I like double checking word counts or formatting or how this is going to be because um, I like knowing how chunky the book is going to be, if that makes sense when formatted. But generally speaking, I just use the Google Docs. I know that sounds really like, I don't know if it's tacky to use Google Docs, but like it works well. I can transport it from my computer to my laptop, keep things kind of all together. So that's nice.
Alrighty. And Dying Breed Tabletop says, why do you think horror has appeal? What is it that drives people to desire tales of fear? I have my own opinions on this, but I'd like to hear yours.
Um, so I've heard a lot of different people talk about what gives horror its appeal. And I think it's one of those things where a lot of it depends on the person. Um, but I think there's a couple different ways you can go about the question. So I think culturally, horror is a good teaching mechanism. We used to teach people about the dangers of the world through like spooky stories. You don't go to these places at night. You don't do this. You don't do that. That kind of thing. Again, to bring up Japanese folklore, young man, do not follow that young pretty girl into the woods because she might be a kitsune. In real life, it's just like, young man, if a strange woman shows up and beckons you into the woods, she might be working with a group of bandits that are going to just murder you.
Mm-hmm.
Just like that kind of thing. I think horror also has the appeal because I feel like, especially nowadays, we've lost connection with certain parts of. Okay, I'm trying to figure out how to explain it because I heard somebody explain a similar concept to it, and I like applying it back to horror. Um, in a lot of ways, we as a society, particularly recently, we've lost our connection with death. For example, you look at the how verbiage has changed. Like the parlor was changed to the living room. There used to be a period where after someone died, the body would stay in the house for a period
Mm-hmm.
before people got buried. We don't we don't really see like chickens get killed anymore for our food. Like we've lost that connection with death. And I think um, because of that, because we spend a lot of our time cloistered away from death and violence, um, we have a fascination with it because it's almost like a foreign entity to us now. Um, because death and violence still happens, but in a lot of ways we're hidden from it.
Yeah.
Um, I think it also provides sort of that roller coaster kind of thing as well. I think it gives you that adrenaline and that nearness to danger without necessarily having to experience it for yourself. Um, it's I think it really depends on the person. Um, I think personally for me, I think that horror provides a way to examine our darkest kind of impulses, both as people, as societies. Um, Also to give a warning about certain things, like I don't know. There's a lot of different reasons why people run to horror. Um, but I what I do know is that people are drawn to it and fascinated by it. In ways that I don't even think that they themselves can tell you why.
Well, I definitely. I mean, you pretty much hit on my points and my feelings about why horror is so fascinating. You know, because it is a thrill ride. It is a roller coaster ride, and it allows us to experience, you know, uh, death as something we can confront and be a little bit thrilled by, but then walk out into the sun and the fresh air and go, well, that wasn't me.
Yeah,
You know, I'm going to live forever. There's going to be some grand, uh, we found the cure for cancer and it
yeah.
also makes you immortal, when I'm, 30, 40, 50 years down the line. Um, and I
Interesting.
think,
Sorry. Interestingly enough, there is a story, a book that came out. I want to say fairly recently. I literally have it on my bookshelf right now. I think it's like called The Immortal or something, and it's just about a society that has cured death
mhm.
and aging and the fallout of that. And it's told in like a series of like very small vignettes, and it's ridiculously fascinating. And
You
um
must tell me what that is. That
uh
sounds great.
yeah, do you mind if I might, can I go run and grab it real quick?
Sure.
Yeah,
Go
give me a
right
second.
ahead. Go right ahead. We'll wait.
I'll be right back.
Okay. Okay. We'll wait for Alyssa to come back. You know, Good questions tonight, guys, and I hope everyone's enjoying. Please, folks, if you haven't already, if you like this kind of content, whether you're watching this afterwards or whether you're just joining us, please do consider clicking the subscribe button, click the bell icon for notifications. And if you're watching this later, maybe leave a comment down below and tell me what you liked about it, and I will do more of it and have ALYSSA on more often. If you didn't like it, well, I'm not going to do less of it and have ALYSSA on less often, but
That's true.
I'm sure we can come to some kind of
They're
agreement.
probably like, she had us until she confused Elric with Drizzt, and now
Oh well, our viewer has actually gone up now. We've crossed 100 since that happened. So confuse more stuff, please. I was doing
dance, woman, dance.
I was doing Stormwatch Wednesday into Thursday, and I streamed for 8 hours. We went until I had 1,000. A thousand, not all at once. Clearly, I don't expect people were watching all the way through, but they had 1,000 people watching. So trust me, you can't scare my audience off. And I thank you for getting back so quickly. I would have thought with
No,
those
you're
Hobbit
fine.
legs, it would have taken you longer. But
It's literally my house is not that big. So this is it's called The Postmortal by Drew McGarry. And it's very fascinating because it's about it's like I said, it's a series of short stories set in a world that has cured death, cure aging. Basically, if you get the cure, quote unquote, you don't age, you don't die. So you have this guy who he's gonna get married and all this other stuff, and then it's like once you're like you no longer die, it's like one of the first things the book brings up a lot is like marriage is till death do you part. Well, if you don't ever die, how long is till death? So that's like the legal ramifications are there. There's a guy who the father of the main character, his wife has died, and he gets the cure, and like 50 years later, he's like, why did I do that? I could be with her right now. And so it's just like this like what if scenario. It's really fascinating. I will say one of the most chilling parts of the story is like this little newspaper clipping about a mom who doesn't want her baby to grow up, so she gives her baby the cure, and her baby will never become an adult.
Well, that's
like that
horrible.
forever. Yeah, it's not really like for it's a very it was marketed as like a very disturbing read, and I don't necessarily say it's that disturbing, but I think it is a very fascinating read, and it's a very fascinating what if. And it kind of sat when I sat back and was like looking over the question of if you could get the cure, would you? I'm like I look forward to aging. I look forward to like my Jessica Marple years and wearing my funny hats and my weird brightly colored jackets and meddling with my husband and that kind of thing. Look, the older I've gotten, the more life kind of makes sense. So I'd recommend it. It's not going to be a read for everybody because it is very like methodical, very experimental about it. And it's kind of like, not to bring BattleTech in as a comparison, but it's kind of like it's almost in school they described this style of writing as almost, it wasn't experimental, it was I forget the term for it, but it was basically like an experiment where you have a scenario and then you drop something in it, and it's basically like what would happen if this happened to this, and that's literally the entire book. So it's not super actiony, it's not anything like that, but it's like a very scientific separation of this is what would naturally progress as a result of this change happening. And the reason I compare it to BattleTech is it's the narrator, the perspective is amoral. I mean, except for like the part where the mom keeps her baby from ever becoming a person, essentially. Um, it's I'd recommend it if you're interested in something that's kind of, I wouldn't call it spooky, but kind of mildly disturbing for the spooky season. I mean, besides my books, but that's the one that I'd recommend.
Right on. And that reminds me, okay. Here's where I have to go to references because the title has left my
Yeah.
brain. There was kind of an inversion of this
Hmm.
in a film that came out not too long ago, and I'm gonna
Describe.
have to look this up. But it starred Robert Redford,
Okay.
and he played a scientist um, who had
All right. All right. For by not too long ago, are we talking like post 2000, like the last
uh,
5
post
years?
post 2000, and it's called The Discovery.
All right. I
And
feel like
in the
I feel like I've heard of
Discovery,
this.
he discovers that unequivocally, without question, scientifically provable, there is an afterlife. And the problem
Oh, you,
is, once
you weren't kidding when it said 2017. When I was thinking Robert Redford, I'm like, how recent is this? But no,
yeah,
oh my gosh, I don't want to be that person. But when I was like, Robert Redford's still alive? Sorry,
yeah.
but sorry, forgive me for that. But it was like, holy
No,
smokes!
no, that's okay. When I think of Robert Redford, I still think of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and
Yeah,
3 Days of the Condor. So I mean, that's my mental pause button for Robert Redford. And I see that.
my first encounter with Robert Redford was again academia. We had to read The Great Gatsby. So it was the Robert Redford in The Great Gatsby, and then compared it to the newer version with Leonardo DiCaprio.
Mhm.
Um, the Robert Redford one was I would say I liked it better. Um, but that's a tangent for a whole nother conversation topic. But yeah, no, the Discovery you're telling me about.
Right. The Discovery basically, um, it scientifically proves the existence of the afterlife and I can't say this word on YouTube, the
Oh,
self termination rate
mm,
just skyrockets
oh,
because who doesn't, oh,
yeah,
oh, okay, it's real. All right, cool.
yeah. That's kind of one of those like where it's not really like horror, but it is disturbing in
It
terms
isn't
of
it's an existential horror.
yeah,
And that brings me to something that I had actually intended to discuss with you, but now that we've pulled on to that off ramp,
yeah.
um, of types of horror, what do you think of Exorcist? I find as I grow older, ooh, Man with a Mask with a Butcher Knife is more of a look. America has 330 million citizens and 450 million privately owned guns.
Yeah.
So Michael Myers is a lot less of a threat.
Oh,
Uh, so when it comes to horror, um, something like to me, again, an existential horror like well, I mean, you mentioned Ito, something like
mm.
Hellstar Ramina.
Yeah, that one to me is a very um I think my I'm trying to remember it's not my favorite, but I think House of Remina is his most, I don't want to say it's most interesting work, but it's up there with Uzumaki. I think it should get just as much um, as Uzumaki. I think that the only reason why Uzumaki is more like celebrated is probably because it has a much stronger ending than I think Remna
Hmm.
does. Uzumaki has kind of some weird in-betweens and bumps, but it ends really well. Remina, I think, is really strong all the way through, and the ending is a little uh some people called it silly. I think it works, but I don't think it's as strong as it could have been. But yeah, the existential horror to me, um, I don't know. I'm trying to think of what for me works the best. Um, I think that I agree. So not to scare you a little. I was born in 1997.
Okay.
So by the time I came around, Freddy Krueger was kind of more like Uncle Freddy. He wasn't scary anymore. He was on lunchboxes. The same thing with
Right.
like Jason and Michael. They're really not scary. They're more like pop culture icons. Um, I actually prefer Candyman, the original Candyman with Tony Todd.
Yeah.
I think that's a top tier slasher film. If you want one that actually kind of takes itself more seriously, A New Nightmare is actually my favorite Freddy Krueger movie. If you haven't seen that one, is
I know that one, and I think that was such a brilliant take on the
yeah.
on the entire genre. I loved it to pieces.
Well, not to get off the on ramp, but we'll get back to our other on ramp real quick.
That's fine.
To me,
We're
acknowledge
driving through the dark unlit country at this point. I don't
yeah.
think it's on ramps and off ramps
So
anymore.
to me, Freddy Krueger stopped being scary after like this, probably like the second movie, at least to me, because again, once you grow up with Freddy Krueger being on lunchboxes and being like a television and the don't forget the power glove, like you can't take him seriously anymore. And I think that Wes Craven was brilliant in acknowledging the fact that he's the idea himself is not scary anymore, and the fact that things were no longer being made really worked in that. I also liked Heather Langenkamp a lot better in this movie than I did the original. I thought she was kind of annoying in the original, to be honest.
Hmm.
But I think that she does the part incredibly well. So I think that's actually my favorite Nightmare on Elm Street. Interestingly enough, acknowledging it, but that might just be um, my perspective of coming in after the movies even came out. Um, but going back to what type of horror really like shakes me up, um, I think that the most recent movies that have like left their mark on me has probably been The Babadook. When I first watched it, I couldn't finish. And I only finished it like years later. That one was pretty freaky. Um, I also the Poughkeepsie tapes also is pretty good. If you've watched that one,
Hmm.
it the Poughkeepsie tapes is one of those like I wouldn't recommend it to some people who are more sensitive to certain content because it's based off of like real life horrendous crimes that have happened to people. So it's not really for everybody.
It's not.
But um, I don't know. It could be the fact that I'm a Christian, so I know where I'm going. But I don't fear existential dread. It may be because I have nightmares where I'm just like, oh well, the giant Lovecraftian tunnels and serial killers on roller skates. Like I don't
Right.
know. It's I'm trying to remember the last time I got really really scared. Um, I think more true crime stuff has popped up recently. Um, I think the horror I enjoy the most um, is stuff with like amazing practical effects because I can enjoy the artistry of it.
Oh yeah, unquestionably. I mean, you look at Alien, you look at The
Yeah,
Thing, even something like see, compared to what followed it, Halloween is practically a taut psychological thriller.
yeah,
And Halloween is, you know, it falls into that same same
Yeah.
genre of, it's just practical effects.
Yeah. Um, if you want a newer practical effects heavy movie, I'd recommend Harbinger Down if you haven't seen it yet.
I have not.
Okay, so Harbinger Down is okay. So do you remember where they did that kind of prequel remake of The Thing in like 20? I think it was like 2012,
I
2009.
I do. I think it was kind of maligned. Particularly, the production team did all the effects
Yeah,
practical and said they look brilliant. And the studio came in and said, "No, redo them all in CGI."
yeah. So apparently they only found out at the premiere of the movie
Yeah,
that they'd got. So actually, Harbinger Down was kind of like the the production team saying, "Oh, you're going to toss out all of our stuff. Well, let's show you. We're going to show you how good of a movie we could make." So I would say that it's not the greatest film ever, but it's all practical effects. It's amazing, and Lance Henriksen is in the movie.
Henriksen.
Henriksen as he just classes up the film something fierce, and it's worth watching for his performance. And the writing's solid. The practical effects are amazing. Um, it's basically a bunch of fishermen uncover this like thing found in the ocean, in the Alaskan like waters, and it's pretty good. I think it's usually on Freevee on Amazon Prime, which is where I watch most of my movies because I am cheap.
There you go. No, there's nothing wrong with being cheap. I watch a fair few on YouTube if you dig around. So I'm a child of the 80s, and I just
Yeah,
to the last word I'm going to say about existential horror, I think it is because I'm a child of the 80s, because
yeah,
you show me um Freddy,
yeah,
Michael, even Jack. I think that probably the best paced and most supremely creepy horror movie ever made is The Shining. Um but you show me that lineup and I'm like, okay, uh Jack and the overlooking everything is creepy, but the rest are just kind of campy
yeah.
and
They're
so
they're fun popcorn flicks. Um,
exactly. You want to
like
scare me?
yeah,
Put
once you have a an Alice Cooper music video with Jason in it, it's kind of like
yeah,
it's
yeah,
just like it's a pop culture thing. It's
yeah.
something to appreciate.
You've lapped yourself and become a meme at that
Yeah.
point. But
I
no,
really want to watch Jason X actually. Speaking of which, I'm hyped for it. I'm ready for it.
uh but no, you want to scare somebody of my generation, sit us down and make us watch Threads or The Day After,
Yeah.
or even something newer like The Road. I
Yeah. It's
to,
it's it's very odd, like comparative, because you're Gen X, correct? I think you
yes,
just okay. So
1970.
yeah, so with my generation, it's very odd because um I'm not saying we have bad taste in horror movies, but all the movies that I've seen, people be like, "Oh, this was so scary" on TikTok or whatever, are usually like hot garbage. um, I think that it's difficult to find. I don't say they don't make them like they used to, but they really don't.
Hmm.
Um, I was talking to my husband actually recently about this, where I was looking at like, okay, name a film that was made since in the last 10 years that we would look back on and say this is a classic movie. That's not a sequel, a remake, or a prequel off of an existing IP. And it's difficult. Now that being said, I haven't seen Midsummer yet, but to me that just comes off as like The Wicker Man,
Yeah,
essentially.
yeah.
And Christopher Lee was in The Wicker Man. The like, how can you compete with Christopher Lee as a cult leader? Though
Yeah.
in all fairness, I probably need to watch Midsummer. I'm interested in watching Heretic, which might be interesting.
Hmm.
That's coming out in November. But even the other one I'm looking forward to, which is Nosferatu, is a remake. I mean, it's going to be a really probably well casted remake because William Defoe's in it, but um, we were struggling to think of movies that would outlast our generation, and I don't know if that's just the movies that have come before have had to withstand the gauntlet of time, and movies from our generation haven't yet gone through the gauntlet. Um, but I just don't know what would be the scary thing for my generation. Um, I think that a lot of us grew up in um, 20 like a lot of us. I'm like an elder Zoomer, so I'm the oldest. um, but a lot of us, I think, isolation, loneliness, insignificance, I think, are going to be the big things going forward with us.
All things that were part of the pandemic,
Yeah.
you know.
Um, and then also, I think being unable to connect with other people meaningfully, I think is going to
Hmm.
be another thing that's going to pop up as a theme in horror going forward. Um, just because it's difficult. It's rare that you meet somebody my age who knows how to hold a conversation with people. Um, not saying it's impossible. Like again, my spouse. But it's sometimes it feels like, and I know a couple teachers who are going through the process of having to teach Gen Alpha, getting them to be able to even connect with people their own age is also a difficult thing. So I think there is going to be existentialism in a lot of it, but it's mostly going to be more less Cthulhu and more like I'm going to die alone
Yeah.
in my
Black
house.
Mirror kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And it's, I mean, I, none of us do, but I don't know. It's, all other things being equal, I don't know how much of that timeline I'm going to see unfold to see Gen
yeah,
Alpha,
yeah,
saying, well, the real horror was in my cell phone all along.
yeah,
Um, but so we talked about this a little bit a good while ago. We've been going for a good clip.
yeah,
And if anyone out there any questions at all,
yeah.
we will do our level best to get those to Alyssa. We like there's anybody else in here but me and the dust mites.
As far as
Um,
they know,
as far as they know. I am actually an animatronic being worked by a team of 6 people.
there's a it's
So you
the
never see me beyond
what's that
here.
movie with the alien inside? Was it Eddie Murphy? Where's like the alien inside of the body?
Dave.
Dave.
Yeah, Dave. But anyway, no. Oh God. Oh, okay. So, what you talked about the books you've got coming up. You've got a third test. Is there a third test sequel? I should say. Uh, is there a genre you have not worked in yet? You want to work in? You plan to work in, but it's not percolating at this moment.
Um,
Any westerns?
if you guys saw a moment, the husband has entered the chat, so he's very respectfully left his shoes on the floor and stepped out. But he
Uh-huh.
exists, guys. He's not a
Okay.
figment of my imagination, I promise.
All right.
Um, so genres that I would like to work in. Um, well, I've done fantasy. I've done urban fantasy. I've done sort of I would call like medium science fiction. Um, like we were talking about before with my newfound BattleTech fascination. It might be fun to dabble in some mech kind of stuff with a little bit of weird fiction thrown in.
Hmm.
Um, hmm. Well, now that you mentioned westerns, that might be fun to dive into at some point. I think I would like to start refining my process with science fiction and fantasy a little bit more before I dive into other things. Um, I do enjoy a good romance. To be honest, that's one of the genres I dive into in my own reading time. But it's very odd because I don't like writing it, if that makes sense. It might be something I would want to incorporate more, but I just feel like I don't want to write a purely romantic book, and I don't want to put romance in a book where it doesn't suit, if that makes
Right.
sense.
No,
Um,
no, no. I
yeah,
got you.
yeah. It's like in the type of it. For example, in the third test, there is kind of a little bit of romance trickled in. I would say between two characters. They're 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 both young. They're both
Hmm.
teenagers. So what I would describe it is like first love rather than true love. And it's sort of like boy meets girl, but there's not a there's a depth to it, but not a lot of pursuit of it, if that makes sense. Um, and part of that was because both characters are young. So I didn't want to do anything to that wouldn't fit the piece and wouldn't make sense. Um, I might explore more of that later on in other books, but I want any sort of other genre added in, not just romance, but in general,
Hmm.
to make sense with the story I'm telling, if that makes sense.
No, that does make sense. You don't want to shoehorn stuff
No.
in to just because,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like a little tiny reference can be one thing, but why is there a dollop of ice cream on top of my steak is a little, you know,
Yeah, that's a little much. A
right.
little much.
Someone asked a question here, and I don't want you to feel on the spot for this. Just go ahead and answer it truthfully. Uh, do you watch my weekly streams?
I apologize. I catch them when I can.
Okay. All right.
Unfortunately,
Kidding.
my good
I
sir,
am teasing
I
you. I am
I
teasing
do I do I don't want to say I have a life,
you.
but let's
It's
see.
fine. I was literally springboarding that into just razzing you a little
Monday
bit.
night is Korean soap opera night.
Of
Yeah,
course,
like
Monday
what
night's
else
great.
would you do on a Monday
What
night?
what else? I nothing.
Thursday night is Pathfinder night. Uh,
Now you're
and
just trying to piss me off.
listen,
I kid.
listen. I didn't choose Pathfinder. The GM chose Pathfinder, and I'm learning Pathfinder, and I'm getting
You're
used to it.
gonna get an anonymous package at your house with 3 AD&D reprints. That's what. So it's gonna be like
Look,
Brad Pitt at the end of Seven.
what's
What's
in
in
the
the box? What
box?
is in the box?
Yeah, no, it's um Pathfinder is not to get on a completely different note. Goes
Mathfinder.
yeah, it's okay. Pathfinder reminds me a lot of two other systems I played. Now it's been a while since I played those two, so I might be completely wrong in my comparison. Chat will correct me, I assume.
They're
Um,
they're they're firm but fair.
um, so it reminds me of two other systems I played: Fantasy Age and Hero. Now, Hero is very interesting because you can pretty much do anything in Hero. You can
Yes,
do
we have
Western,
talked extensively about Hero System.
yeah.
I'm a
Um,
long time Hero System vet.
the problem with Hero System is that you need like a computer to make a character sheet.
Yeah. I
We,
let me tell you something. Alyssa, I know I got it. I got it. Normally I don't just stomp on a guest right here. I have been playing Hero System since 1989. I
holy folks.
still don't have a good handle on building a character efficiently. So
Yeah.
please
I know.
continue.
I remember when we were playing Hero. Um, my dad would boot up his computer, and there was a program that would make this
Yep.
computer the character sheet for you, and then you'd print it off. And every
Yeah.
time you leveled up, you had to go back to that computer system and do it. and I'm just, this is too much.
I want to
This,
take a half disadvantage and put the 3 experience points back into my energy blast.
yeah. And
Ah,
it can be very fun, once you have it set up. If you have a DM that actually understands how all the math works.
yeah,
If you don't, it's just, it can feel a little. It can be a lot.
yeah,
Then Fantasy Age. Fantasy Age is a system that, um, it's. I don't want to be mean to the system, but it's kind of like, if you don't know exactly what you're going to do from day one in how you're going to build your entire root character, and what you have to know at level 1 what you want to do at level 5, so you don't shaft yourself. And even then you can still shaft yourself. You kind of have to pre-plan like 7 levels ahead in order to get what you want.
yeah.
Pathfinder, we started the campaign a couple of months before I was getting married, and I was like, "You want me to learn a new system, an entirely new system? Um, why would you? I thought you guys liked me." But I did my best. I had a mental breakdown at one point, and then my husband, my dear sweet husband, printed off a new character sheet for me, and then we went step by step through the character creation process. We must have gone through it 3 times before I got my character right. Um, and now that I'm married and no longer having to deal with the pressure of planning a wedding, only the pressure of getting all this legal paperwork done, it's a lot more enjoyable.
I can imagine. I can imagine.
Um,
Yeah. And
I I decided I was going to play the simplest. I looked at the GM and I was like, give me the simplest character class I could possibly have. So I'm playing a wizard. So elf
there
wizard,
you go. There you
classic.
go. Well,
Nothing.
I envy you having the time to do that because I'm old and I'm going to die soon. So I can't. I unfortunately can't invest a lot in
Pathfinder.
yeah, in learning Pathfinder. I will say this: a friend invited me into a game that lasted about 6 weeks. This is a number of years ago,
Okay.
and he said it's a fairly high level game, and I said, okay, do you mind a do you mind a little fourth wall breaking? He's like, well, don't be egregious with it, but what were you thinking? What do you want to run? And I'll just make you up a character. And I said, Robert Plant. And he was like, you mean a bard? And I said, no, I mean Robert Plant. And he said, Robert Plant, if he had access to fantasy and magic. And I said, Robert Plant. So we cooked up Robert Plant as a bard for a high level Pathfinder game, and for 6 weeks I had so much fun spamming the
Yeah.
chat with Led Zeppelin songs, and then it wrapped up, and I haven't gone back, but
Yeah.
I didn't do anything other than roll the d20 when I was asked to. So
It was difficult to want to play Pathfinder because I before this I'd never had a good Pathfinder experience.
mhm.
Not blaming the system, but the first time I wanted to play, um, the GM was drinking at 8 o'clock in the morning,
Okay,
so that was fun.
yeah,
It was at a
there.
convention, and I was like 12 at the time, and my
Oh,
yeah, I was 12, and my dad was sitting right next to me, and he's like pouring beer into his coffee mug. So
well,
that was my first.
convention conventions are a different vibe,
Yeah.
but
The second time was a Pathfinder Society game, and I wanted to do something that wasn't like in their strict script, and the GM just ended up ignoring me, which was fun.
yeah,
Um, so
yeah.
it was just like, after that, I'm not saying I developed a prejudice against Pathfinder, but I'm like, I don't know if I want to play this again. So when my GM was like, "We should play Pathfinder," I'm like, "Okay," but I'm giving it the old college try, and it's turning out pretty good. I'm enjoying the character, which is knock on wood for my character's going to die soon.
just draw a little sketch.
I painted the miniature and everything.
Oh yeah. You're done.
So
You're
yeah,
done. So
yeah.
you're
Well, so
done. So.
part of the fun of it is that I'd played with this. This is the same group I'd played the Star Wars campaign that I mentioned earlier with the old man.
Mm-hmm.
So we've gotten to know each other pretty well over the last little bit. And one of the other female player, there's another lady player at the table, and I was like, "Hey, do you want to play sisters?" And she was like, "Yes." So I am a full elf wizard, and she's playing a half elf bard. And the story goes that I'm the first child of an elvish father, and my father had a midlife crisis dalliance with a human, and now I'm being sent to babysit it on her bardic career.
Nice.
So I'm her manager, and I'm basically making sure she doesn't drink her profits. So it's actually that's part of what makes it a lot of fun is that I'm like I think I was telling you earlier, that's part of the fun of TTRPGs for me is that you can sit and you can make stories with the people that you're sitting with, and having Hazel with me, and we're just like ribbing off of each other and making fun of each other and like being sisters, half sisters in game. Um, and it's just a lot of fun.
So you're like Heart, basically.
Yeah, kind of. But no, it's just a good time, and I'm learning the system as best I can, and I'm just gonna take some time, and I limit myself to the player's book as much as possible, so I'm not getting overwhelmed by all of the possibilities that come with Pathfinder. So that
Excellent.
kind of made things easier.
Cool. Very cool. And when will you start playing first edition AD&D?
Well,
I'm
good sir.
again teasing you.
I know. I'll be honest. I would be open to being a part of a one shot or something. If you want to, if you're running a one shot at some point, if you
Yeah,
want to,
I think your invitation is pretty much given at this juncture.
all right. Well,
You
give me time to check my calendar, and
all right, yeah.
married life is keeping me busy.
Is it?
Yeah, it's
Really?
husbands are so needy, and they need to be fed and things like that.
Yeah, a husband like that, you got to feed him like twice a day at least.
Yeah, it's true. Uh,
So no, good.
no, you get it. I was just like,
So I'm gonna put up the Amazon link here for you folks who don't know. This isn't just some rando who wandered into the studio to talk about TTRPGs. She is in fact my guest, author ALYSSA HAZEL, and you can find her stuff right here on Amazon. And we're gonna put that right there, and then I'm gonna put it up on screen. So
handily,
but
I have
handily.
So these right now are okay. So these are some copies that I have right here. This one's actually my audiobook reference. This sells out pretty quick. This is my $5, not this is my $5 one, and this one is my science fiction thriller. Though I will say right now, I think he was about to drop the promo, but tonight's the last night for the 99-cent sale for
That's correct.
Pleasant Little Moments and Stress Fractures in ebook format. So if you want to try out my stuff, but like me, you are cheap and miserly, it gives you a chance to try out my stuff without paying too much for it. So if you're interested, that will be available, I believe, through end of the evening today.
Well, there you go, guys. Now is your chance to get your hands on some great thrilling fiction, be a mention. Jump on the third test, even if it's not on sale, because that's damn good science fiction. And as I
Thanks.
have it on good authority that a sequel's coming, with or without giant robots, we don't know. We'll just have to
I
see.
might throw in one right at the end as a cliffhanger, and then
There
wait
you go.
another 10 years to write the third book.
And it'll still come out before Winds of Winter. But um, anything else? Is there anything we didn't cover? Anything? Any points you would like to bring up? Anything like that?
Um, I'm thinking to myself, I think we covered a lot of good territory. I don't know if anybody has any additional questions that they want answered, but um, now's the time if you want me to put me on the spot, ask all the pressing questions about who would win in a death match between Bigfoot and Mothman. But um,
It's Bigfoot, but
I mean,
anyway.
that's true. I mean, I love Mothman, but I think he's like a shy guy. He just wants to hang around. Bigfoot would probably uh, beat him up and take his lunch money. So
Well, given the insane ramblings I heard from a guest on the Art Bell show about 10, 15 years ago, apparently Bigfoot can teleport and is from inside the hollow earth. So yeah, I gotta go with Bigfoot.
I mean, fair enough.
Fair enough.
If you can't trust some guy on a television show, who can you trust? You know.
Exactly. But anyway, Nordic has a question in parting, and says, "Who would win in a death match? Chuck Norris versus Chuck Norris."
Oh,
Uh,
that
that's how we get cold fusion, I think.
yeah. It depends. Are we talking like a mirror universe scenario where one of the Chuck Norrises has a goatee and the other one doesn't? And in that case, which is the evil Chuck Norris, the one with the goatee or the one without the goatee?
Well, I mean that's an important question, Nordic. You gotta consider all those factors. It's not just cut and dried, my friend.
That's true. Because like Chuck Norris normally he's got a big old bushy beard, so it's just like would Chuck Norris Mirror Universe be just the goatee or clean shaven or which one would it be? That's the real question. We have to consider all the scenarios before we can draw the conclusion.
Yeah, yeah. I mean that is very very true. Also, I should point out behind his beard is just another fist.
That is
So
true. That's why he grows it so that it hides it from his
yeah, you won't
enemies.
see it coming. Yeah, you'll get up close and in his
Just
face,
the
and
chin, just
yeah, and the next thing you know. Alyssa, it has been an absolute blast having you on the show. When
thanks.
are you coming back? And don't say after your next wedding.
Hopefully not. This is my last guy. I'm not doing this whole dating thing again.
Okay,
I did
fair
my
enough.
time in Azkaban.
Right on. Well,
um,
all kidding aside, we would love to see you back again in 2025 when you've got,
oh,
a
oh,
few hours on a
absolutely.
Saturday or Sunday
Um,
evening.
I'd love to do that. Honestly, I don't think I have anything in February right now, so maybe
Well,
we'll have
we'll
to.
we'll
We'll, but we'll just iron out some details, and I'll arrive for an interview and be thrown into an AD and D one shot.
that's right.
Surprise!
Surprise, we're live streaming a game you're playing. Anyway,
Wait a second.
um so thank you again for being here. Please help yourself to some refreshments in the green room
Will
while
do.
I get these bums out of the studio. No, you're all bums in a good way. I mean that in a good way. So we're gonna go ahead then and do one of these, and I'm gonna turn off the blinking lights here for a second. And everybody, please check out Alyssa's stuff. And I'll be back on Monday. I'm not streaming tomorrow. I streamed through a hurricane for 8 hours. You guys can give me Sunday off. And if you don't, well, I'll just sick a gosh darn owlbear on you. Good night. So long. Have a good evening.
Have you seen my owl bear? Here's to all the weirdos everywhere in the woods and in the air. Have you seen my owl bear? Should I shave off all my hair? Bobs are all around. Some live in tunnels underground. Some are fat, some are rich, some are sleeping in a ditch. Can you ride a crooked horse without a saddle way off course? Naked as a toad all the way to Smoky Joe's. Have you seen the little creep driving fast in his little green Jeep? He smells like fish and brandy, but his rotten teeth look dandy. Take me to the show, I don't care if fast or slow. From action flicks to dancing dicks, just take me to the show.